The first insult reached Lady Rosamund Vale before she had even crossed the threshold of Harrowmere Hall. "Good heavens! Is that Sir Edmund's poor relation?" a woman whispered behind a fan. Not softly enough to be kind. I thought she had been put away in Hampshire, where no one would have to remember her. Rosamund paused only long enough for the footman to announce her name. And then she stepped into the blazing gold light of the hunt ball as though she had not heard a word. England, 1817, had taught women like her the art of surviving small cruelties without leaving a mark. A lady could be cut with a smile, dismissed with a glance, and stripped of dignity by laughter no louder than the clink of a take-up. Rosamund had endured all three before her first season had ended. By 28, she had learned to keep her spine straight when her purse was nearly empty. Her gloves were mended twice over, and the roof above her head belonged to a cousin who never let her forget the cost of it. Harrowmere Hall rose around her in polished marble, candlelit mirrors, and garlands of winter greenery tied with hunting ribbons. The ballroom opened beyond a pair of tall doors, bright with chandeliers and crowded with silk gowns, black evening coats, jeweled throats, and careful smiles. Musicians played a country dance with practiced cheer, but beneath the music ran the sharper sound of society, measuring everyone in the room. Rosamund felt the measure fall upon her at once. The skirt of her pale blue gown had been turned and freshened by her own hand. The lace at her sleeves was clean but not new. Her dark hair had been pinned without a fashionable abundance of pearls. Worst of all, she carried the old brown riding gloves that had belonged to her father, folded carefully beneath her fan. She had brought them because Sir Edmund had insisted she attend the hunt ball as an ornament to his respectability, yet had refused to pay for new gloves fit for the evening. "You will stand where you are told," he had said in the carriage, smoothing his waistcoat as if her existence were an inconvenience that had wrinkled him. "You will not draw notice. You will not contradict anyone, and if the Duke should speak to our party, you will remember that gratitude is the only attractive quality left to a woman in your position." Rosamund had looked out at the dark road and answered, "Of course, cousin." It was the answer he wanted. It was not the promise he thought it was. Now, Sir Edmund Vale moved ahead of her with the confidence of a man who possessed more pride than money. He was not old, but worry over debts had sharpened his face until it looked carved from pale wood. He bowed to acquaintances, laughed too loudly, and spoke often of ancient bloodlines, as if saying the word ancient could hide the fact that creditors knew his direction. Rosamund followed at a proper distance, accompanied by his sister, Mrs. Havers, who considered chaperonage a punishment inflicted upon both of them. They had scarcely reached the edge of the ballroom when Lady Clarissa Penworth turned from a cluster of admirers and smiled. Clarissa was everything society preferred a future duchess to be. She was fair, graceful, beautifully dressed, and cruel in a way that passed for wit when spoken by a woman with £30,000 expected upon marriage. Her gown was white satin embroidered with silver thread. Her gloves were pearl grey and faultless. Her eyes settled at once on the worn leather in Rosamund's hand. "Lady Rosamund," Clarissa said, letting the name linger as though it were a tune badly played. How charming. I did not know Harrowmere had opened the stable entrance to guests. A few people nearby laughed, not loudly. That would have been vulgar. They laughed just enough to make refusal impossible. Rosamund inclined her head. "I came through the front doors, Lady Clarissa, but I am relieved to hear you know where the stable entrance is. It may save the servants trouble later." Clarissa's smile tightened. Sir Edmund's fingers closed around Rosamund's wrist before he remembered they were being watched. "My cousin is fond of rustic humour," he said. "One forgives much in the country." "One must," Clarissa replied, "especially when country habits cling." Her gaze dropped again to the riding gloves. "Do you mean to dance in those?" Rosamund looked at the gloves. The leather was soft from years of use, darkened at the knuckles, and mended with neat stitches near the thumb. Her father had worn them in rain, wind, and bitter mornings when he taught her to sit a saddle without fear. Captain Elias Vale had never been rich, but he had possessed the kind of dignity that made poverty seem temporary and honor permanent. He had died owing no man an apology. Rosamund wished she could say the same for those who survived him. "No," she said calmly. "I mean to keep them." Clarissa tilted her head. "How sentimental." "How fortunate," Rosamund answered. "Some things become more valuable because they have endured use." A brief silence followed. Not admiration, not yet. Surprise, perhaps. Society never expected the dependent woman to answer without trembling. Sir Edmund bent close enough for his words to reach only her. "Do not forget yourself." Rosamund did not look at him. "I seldom have that luxury." Before he could reply, the room changed. It did not grow louder, it grew more attentive. Conversation drew inward. Fans slowed. Mothers touched their daughters' elbows. Gentlemen straightened without admitting they had done so. Near the main staircase, the Duke of Alder-mere had entered his own ballroom. Sebastian Harrow was not the handsomest man Rosamund had ever seen, if handsomeness required ease. There was nothing easy about him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in black evening clothes cut with severe perfection. A white waistcoat and cravat gave no softness to him. Candlelight caught the dark gold of his hair and the hard line of his jaw. But it was his stillness that commanded the room. He seemed less like a host than a man listening for artillery no one else could hear. People said he had returned from Waterloo with a title, a limp that appeared only when he was tired, and a warhorse no groom could master but him. People said he did not dance unless duty forced him. People said he had dismissed 3 ambitious mothers with 6 words each, and had once ended a dinner conversation merely by setting down his glass. People said many things about dukes when dukes were too powerful to contradict them. Rosamund watched him because everyone watched him. Then she stopped watching as everyone did. The others saw rank. She saw tension in the hand he kept loose at his side. She saw the way his eyes moved first to the exits, then to the terrace doors, then to the servants stationed near the wall. A soldier's habit, perhaps, or a wounded man's. His gaze swept the room and passed over Clarissa's brilliant smile, Sir Edmund's eager bow, Mrs. Havers's fluttering feathers, and the young ladies arranged like offerings beneath the chandeliers. Then, for the briefest instant, it rested on Rosamund. Not on her gown, not on her lack of jewels, on the riding gloves in her hand. His expression did not alter, yet something in his attention sharpened. Rosamund felt it like a hand placed near a flame. Sir Edmund immediately stepped forward. "Your Grace," he said, bending low. "Sir Edmund Vale. We had the honor of meeting at Lord Halberry's dinner last season." "Did we?" the Duke asked. His voice was quiet, but the room made space for it. Sir Edmund coloured. "Briefly, Your Grace." Clarissa moved with graceful certainty into the opening. "Your Grace, you have deprived us of your presence for nearly half the evening. The estate required my attention. How dutiful. We were beginning to fear you had abandoned us to the music." The music appears to have survived. A smile trembled through the nearby group. Clarissa accepted the rebuff as if it were flirtation, which was a skill Rosamund almost admired. "Then perhaps you will rescue at least one lady from it before supper." Sebastian did not answer at once. His gaze shifted just past Clarissa, to where a young gentleman had lifted Rosamund's gloves from the chair beside her with 2 fingers. "Are these relics from the peninsula, Lady Rosamund?" he asked, his mouth curved in amusement. "Or does one now bring tack into ballrooms?" Laughter stirred again. This time Sebastian turned his head. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Return them." The gentleman froze. "Your Grace?" "The gloves. Return them to Lady Rosamund." Colour climbed the young man's throat. He placed the gloves back on the chair as though they had burned him. Rosamund's heart gave one hard, disobedient beat. No one had defended her for the sake of simple decency in a very long time. She picked up the gloves before gratitude could soften her face into something vulnerable. "Thank you, Your Grace." Sebastian looked at her. "They are yours." It was not a compliment. It was not tenderness. Yet it carried a strange weight, as if he had recognized the boundary of a thing and enforced it because boundaries mattered. Clarissa's eyes cooled. Sir Edmund's smile strained. Around them, society made quick calculations. A duke had noticed a slight dun to a poor relation. That did not mean favor. It did mean danger to anyone who laughed too freely. The musicians began another set. Conversation recovered, though it did not resume its former ease. Rosamund retreated toward the edge of the ballroom, near the tall windows that overlooked the stable courtyard. Outside, lanterns moved like small moons in the dark. The scent of wax, perfume, and hothouse flowers pressed against the glass, but beneath it, faint and impossible. She thought she caught the smell of horse sweat and cold air. She turned her head. A groom crossed the courtyard too quickly. Then another. A door near the mews banged open. Rosamund's fingers tightened around her father's gloves. She had spent enough of her childhood near horses to know the difference between ordinary stable disorder and fear. Across the room, Sebastian had gone still. Not polite stillness. Dangerous stillness. His eyes were fixed on the same dark courtyard. Clarissa was speaking to him, but he no longer heard her. Then came the sound that tore through music, manners, rank, and candlelight alike. A scream rose from outside. A boy's scream. The orchestra faltered. Glass chimed as someone dropped a punch cup. At the far end of the terrace, a servant shouted, "Valor's loose!" Every face turned toward the Duke. Rosamund turned toward the doors. For half a second, no one moved. The whole glittering room seemed pinned beneath its own shock. Then she saw, beyond the window, the shadow of a great dark horse, rearing against the lantern light, and a small figure trapped too near the stone mounting block. Rosamund did not think of Clarissa. She did not think of Sir Edmund. She did not think of scandal, gratitude, poverty, or the hundreds of eyes that had spent the evening deciding what she was worth. She pulled on her father's old riding gloves and ran. Rosamund reached the terrace doors before any gentleman had decided whether courage was proper. Cold air struck her face, sharp with frost, horse sweat, and the bitter smoke of stable lanterns. Behind her, the ballroom had become a golden blur of faces and gasps. Ahead, the courtyard was chaos held together by terrified men with useless hands. Valor reared near the mounting block, a huge black shape against the lantern light, his forelegs cutting the air while a groom clung to a broken lead, as if silk could restrain thunder. A young page lay against the low stone wall, white-faced and frozen, not 5 feet from the horse's plunging hooves. "Move away from him," someone cried. The boy did not move. Fear had emptied him of command. Rosamund did not call out. Sudden noise would only sharpen the animal's panic. She slowed, though every part of her wanted to run faster. Her father's old gloves were tight over her fingers. The worn leather steadied her. "Easy," she said low and clear. "Easy, my brave boy." Valor swung his head toward her. His eyes rolled white at the edges. Foam flecked the dark bit. A strap hung loose near his cheek, twisted wrong, and one rein dragged beneath him in the filthy straw scattered over the stones. Rosamund saw it all in the space of a breath. Not madness, not savagery, fear, pain, confusion. "Lady Rosamund!" Sir Edmund's voice cracked behind her. "Come back at once." She did not turn. "Get the boy away when I draw him aside," she said to the nearest groom. The man stared at her as if she had spoken Greek. "My lady." "No one but His Grace handles that horse." Then His Grace should have come sooner. The words were out before she could weigh them. She heard a ripple behind her, shock folding into shock. Then she heard the Duke's voice, closer than she expected. "Do as she says." That command moved men faster than fear. 2 grooms edged toward the wall. Valor stamped, striking sparks from the stone. Rosamund lifted her empty hand, palm open. She did not look him full in the eye. Horses did not need a challenge when they were already trapped inside terror. "You know a field voice, do you not?" she murmured. "You know a rider who isn't afraid of your size." Valor snorted. His ears flicked, only once, but once was enough. She stepped nearer. 10 feet. 8. 6. Behind her, the Duke had gone silent. The whole estate seemed to be holding its breath through him. Rosamund saw the saddle, half set from some earlier exercise. The girth loosened in a way no careful groom would leave it. A dangerous looseness, intentional or careless, but wrong. Very wrong. The page whimpered. Valor tossed his head again. The nearest groom lunged for the boy too soon. The horse lurched sideways. Rosamund moved before thought could stop her. She caught the hanging rein, twisted it clear of Valor's foreleg, and stepped close against the great shoulder where a frightened horse had less room to strike. Now she's the groom, dragged the boy away from the wall. Valor surged. Rosamund seized the saddle pommel. Her boot found the edge of the mounting block. Someone screamed her name. It might have been Mrs. Havers. It might have been every lady in England who had ever mistaken obedience for virtue. Rosamund rose, swung and landed astride. The saddle shifted beneath her. She felt it give an inch and locked her knees at once. Valor bounded forward. The courtyard rushed around her in broken pieces. Lantern, wall, groom, terrace, white faces, the Duke's black coat. She shortened the rein with one hand and pressed her gloved fingers against the trembling neck. "Steady," she breathed. "You won't shame yourself. Not tonight." Valor tossed once more, but her weight settled deep, not fighting him, not sawing his mouth, only giving him a path through fear. Her father's voice seemed to come back across years and rain. "Never argue with a panicked horse, Rosie. Give him somewhere to go, and a reason to trust your hands." The open terrace doors blazed ahead. Rosamund did not mean to enter the ballroom. She meant only to turn him in the widest space, away from the boy, away from the slippery stones, away from the shouting men. But a footman stumbled with a tray. A groom waved his arms in panic. Valor shied from the sudden flash of silver and surged toward the light. "Clear the doors." Sebastian's voice cut through the night. People scattered. Silk skirts swept back. Men pulled ladies away from the threshold. The orchestra stopped on a broken note. Rosamund felt the saddle slip again. She could not dismount in the crush. She could not force him back into the courtyard, so she did the only thing left. She rode him forward. Valor crossed from the cold dark into chandeliers and astonishment. His hooves struck the polished floor with a sound that silenced every breath in the ballroom. For one impossible instant, all of Harrowmere Hall became still around them. Rosamund saw Lady Clarissa standing near a marble column, one hand at her throat, her perfect face emptied of colour. She saw Sir Edmund with his mouth open in horror, not for her safety, but for what she had done to his calculations. She saw young ladies clutching their mothers. She saw gentlemen pressed back like schoolboys, and at the centre of it all, she saw Sebastian Harrow. He had not retreated. He stood 10 feet inside the ballroom, black-clad and motionless, his eyes fixed not on the scandal but on Valor's head, his hands open at his sides. "Valor," he said quietly. The horse heard him. Rosamund felt the change pass through the animal's body, a shudder running from neck to flank. "Good," she whispered. "There he is. There is your master." Valor took one step. Then another. His breathing thundered beneath her. Rosamund kept her seat, though the loose girth burned a line of danger through every second. A broken strap brushed her left glove. She looked down and saw the buckle had been cut nearly through, cleanly enough that it could not have snapped by accident. Her heart clenched. Before she could speak, Valor lowered his great head. The entire ballroom seemed to lean forward. The horse bent one knee, then the other, and sank before the Duke of Alder-mere, as if the polished floor had become a battlefield chapel. Rosamund nearly lost her balance. Sebastian stepped forward at once and caught the bridle close to the bit, steadying both horse and rider without touching more than he must. "Do not move yet," he said to her. His voice was low, meant only for her, but it carried more command than any shout. "The saddle is wrong, I know." Her own voice, surprised, it was steady. "The girth has been cut." His eyes lifted to hers. Something cold passed through them, not anger at her, something far more dangerous. "Are you hurt?" "No." Then she felt the sting in her palm and looked down. Dark red had soaked through the torn seam of her riding glove, where the rain had burned across old leather and skin. Not much. Sebastian removed his evening coat in one swift motion and held it up between her and the crowd as 2 grooms came carefully to Valor's side. "Now," he said. Rosamund swung down with less grace than society would have preferred and more dignity than it deserved. Her boots touched the ballroom floor. The Duke's coat came around her shoulders before the gasps could become whispers. It was warm from his body and smelled faintly of wool, winter air, and leather. She should have objected. A lady wrapped in a duke's coat before half the county was not saved from scandal. She was placed at the center of it. Yet the moment the coat covered her, the laughter that had followed her all evening died completely. Sebastian looked over the crowd. No one spoke. He did not ask for silence. He owned it. The page, now safe in the arms of a footman, began to cry softly near the terrace. Rosamund heard it and closed her eyes for one heartbeat. The boy was alive. That had to matter more than the ruin that might follow. "Lady Rosamund," the Duke said, and the formal address steadied her more than tenderness could have done. "You saved him." "I did what any person should have done." "No," he said. "You did what every person failed to do." The words moved through the ballroom like the first crack in winter ice. Rosamund looked away, because gratitude was suddenly more difficult to bear than insult. Clarissa found her voice first. "Your Grace, surely Lady Rosamund did not understand the danger. It was reckless, astonishingly reckless." "It was effective," Sebastian replied. Clarissa's cheeks colored. Sir Edmund pushed forward, bowing too quickly. "Your Grace, I beg you to forgive my cousin. She has always been impulsive around horses. A regrettable country habit. I assure you, she meant no display." Rosamund's hand curled beneath the Duke's coat. Sebastian glanced at her, then at Sir Edmund. "She meant to save a child." "Yes, naturally. But the appearance of the thing will be discussed by people with less courage than she showed." That silenced him. Not kindly, completely. Then an older woman's voice came from near the foot of the staircase. "Sebastian." The Dowager Duchess Harrow had entered without haste, leaning lightly on an ebony cane. Age had not softened her. It had refined her into something sharper than fashion, and older than gossip. She looked at Valor kneeling on the ballroom floor, at Rosamund standing in Sebastian's coat, and at the cut strap now held by a pale groom. Her face changed. Not much, but enough. "Oh," she said softly. The Duke turned. "Mother." The Dowager came closer, and the crowd parted for her as it had for him. She stopped before Rosamund and studied her with eyes that missed nothing. Not the bloodied glove, not the worn gown, not the trembling she was fighting to hide. Then the Dowager looked at Valor, still calm on his knees before the Duke. The old woman's hand tightened on her cane. "In House Harrow," she said, low enough to sound private and clear enough for the entire ballroom to hear. "That means he has chosen her." Rosamund felt the words strike the room before she understood their weight. Fans froze. Clarissa went utterly still. Sir Edmund made a small sound, half triumph and half fear. Sebastian's face hardened. "Mother, not now. Especially now," the Dowager said. "The custom is older than your title and more stubborn than your temper." Rosamund looked from mother to son. "Your Grace," she said to Sebastian, "I don't understand." His jaw tightened. And for the first time since entering the ballroom, the Duke of Alder-mere looked as though the ground beneath him had shifted. Before he could answer, Lady Clarissa whispered, "Impossible." The Dowager heard her and smiled without warmth. "My dear Lady Clarissa, ancient houses are built upon many impossible things." Then she turned back to her son. "Whatever else you do tonight, Sebastian, you will protect this lady's name before anyone leaves this room." The Duke looked at Rosamund, at the coat around her shoulders, at the torn glove in her hand, and at the crowd already preparing to turn miracle into scandal. When he spoke, his voice was quiet enough to chill every whisper. "No one will leave until I know who touched my horse." The silence after the Duke's command was not the silence of obedience. It was the silence of calculation. Every lady in the ballroom understood that a child had nearly been hurt, that a warhorse had crossed a line no animal should cross, and that Lady Rosamund Vale stood wrapped in the Duke of Alder-mere's coat beneath the eyes of half the county. Yet society did not first ask what was true. It asked what could be repeated. Sebastian seemed to know it. He stood beside Valor with one hand still near the bridle, his black evening coat missing, his white shirt sleeves stark beneath the chandelier light. Without the coat, he looked less like a polished host and more like the soldier rumour had never finished burying. "Mr. Dawlish," he said to the steward, who had appeared near the terrace with a face as pale as paper. "Close the outer gates. No guest's carriage is to leave until I have spoken with my head groom." A murmur travelled through the room. The Dowager Duchess tapped her cane once upon the floor. His Grace did not ask for commentary. The murmur died. Rosamund felt the warmth of Sebastian's coat around her shoulders and wished it did not feel like protection. Protection was dangerous when it came from a man powerful enough to turn it into possession. Sir Edmund eased closer with a smile that trembled at the edges. "Your Grace, surely there is no need to detain respectable families. A stable accident, regrettable though it is, hardly requires such severity." Sebastian did not look at him. A cut girth as not an accident. The word cut struck the room harder than scream had. Clarissa's fan opened with a snap. Cut? How dreadful. But surely some careless groom is responsible. Servants do grow lax when great households are generous. Rosamund looked toward the terrace. The head groom, a square man with iron-grey hair, held the damaged strap in both hands. His expression carried insult deeper than fear. Sebastian noticed. "No servant in my stable will be accused to ease a guest's discomfort." Clarissa lowered her eyes with practiced grace. "Of course." "Your Grace, I only meant that a lady of breeding could hardly know such things." "Lady Rosamund knew," he said. It was not praise, it was evidence. Rosamund wished the floor would stop tilting beneath her. She had saved a boy. She had controlled a frightened horse. She had not asked for custom, witness, scandal, or the particular horror of being examined by women who had mocked her an hour before, and now wondered whether she had climbed higher than any of them. The Dowager moved to her side. "Come with me, child." "I am not a child, Your Grace," Rosamund said before caution could intervene. The older woman's mouth twitched. "Plainly not. Come with me anyway." Sebastian's gaze flicked to Rosamund. "Mother!" "She is bleeding through her glove, Sebastian, and half your guests are measuring her for a wedding veil, while the other half are measuring her for a noose of gossip. I will take her to the blue withdrawing room. You may interrogate leather and horsemen without requiring the lady to stand beneath chandeliers like a captured banner." Rosamund almost smiled. Almost. Sebastian gave one short nod. "Lady Rosamund remains under my mother's protection." Sir Edmund brightened at the phrase, as if protection could be converted into income. Clarissa heard it too, and something hard moved behind her pretty eyes. Rosamund handed the Duke's coat back. He did not take it. "Keep it," he said. "You are cold." "I am not cold." "Then keep it because I asked poorly." The answer was so unexpected that she looked at him. For a breath, the ballroom vanished into the space between them. His face remained controlled, but his eyes had changed. They held suspicion, yes. Also something like regret. Rosamund gathered the coat closer and followed the Dowager from the room. The blue withdrawing room was lit by 2 lamps and a low fire. Its calm felt almost indecent after the violence of attention outside. The Dowager rang for warm water, lint and brandy, then sent away the maid after one glance at Rosamund's face.
"Sit, Lady Rosamund."
Rosamund sat. Her knees were steadier than her hands. The Dowager took the injured glove gently, though nothing else about her suggested gentleness by habit. "This is old leather. It was my father's, a cavalryman. Yes, that explains why you did not behave like a goose in a thunderstorm." Rosamund released a breath that might have become laughter if she were less tired. "Your Grace, I need to understand what you said in the ballroom. About Valor kneeling. Yes. I would rather not learn from gossip that I have accidentally married your son by horse." The Dowager laughed once, sharp and genuine. "No, my dear. England has not yet surrendered marriage law to the preferences of animals, however wise this particular animal may be." Rosamund's shoulders loosened, then tightened again. "Then what does it mean?" The Dowager cleaned the torn skin across Rosamund's palm with careful pressure. House Harrow began as soldiers before it became dukes. The family kept a custom from rougher centuries. When the Duke's chosen warhorse bends before a woman who has carried danger across the threshold and lived, The household calls her the Duke's intended. Not wife, not legally bound intended. That sounds perilously close to a trap. Most traditions are traps, unless decent people remember consent. The words settled between them. Rosamund looked at the older woman more closely. And does your son remember it? My son remembers duty before he remembers breathing. Tenderness takes him longer. The door opened before Rosamund could answer. Sebastian entered without ceremony, then stopped when his mother lifted one finger. If you have come to loom, stand by the mantle. If you have come to accuse, leave. I have come to ask questions. Those are often the same thing in a man's mouth. Rosamund looked down to hide her reaction. Sebastian obeyed the mantle, as if the dowager still commanded armies. His gaze went first to Rosamund's bandaged palm, then to the ruined glove on the side table. The page is unharmed, he said, frightened but unharmed. Relief moved through her so quickly that she had to close her hand around the chair arm. Thank God. He said you spoke to Valor before you touched him. I did, as if you knew him, as if I knew horses. His eyes held hers. There is a difference, not when everyone else is shouting. The dowager looked faintly pleased. Sebastian did not. The girth was cut nearly through, clean blade, hidden beneath the saddle flap. The bridle strap was twisted afterward, likely to increase panic once the horse moved. Rosamund felt the warmth leave her face. Someone wanted him loose. Someone wanted him dangerous. Not Valor, she said at once. Whoever did it made him frightened, not vicious. Sebastian's expression shifted by a fraction. You defend my horse before yourself. Your horse did not invite me to this ball, mock my gloves, or place me in a scandal. The dowager made a small sound into her teacup. Sebastian stepped closer, then stopped, as if he had caught himself advancing on a skittish creature, and hated the comparison. Lady Rosamund, did anyone ask you to go near the stables tonight? No. Did anyone tell you of the Harrow custom before tonight? No. Did you know Valor would kneel? I did not know any horse in England was expected to comment on matrimonial prospects. The dowager's mouth curved again. Sebastian's did not, but something in his eyes warmed despite himself. Then the door opened, and Mr. Dawlish entered, holding a small folded cloth upon a silver tray. Forgive me, Your Grace. The head groom found this near the damaged strap. Sebastian took the cloth and opened it. A narrow piece of dark brown leather lay inside, ragged at one edge. Rosamund knew it before anyone spoke. Her gaze dropped to her glove on the table. Near the thumb, where old stitches had been worn thin, a small section was missing. The room seemed to grow smaller. That is mine, she said. Sebastian looked from the fragment to her glove. It appears so. The words were careful, too careful. Rosamund rose. You think I cut the girth and left part of my own glove there? I think someone wishes me to think it. That is not what I hardened. I do not yet know what I think. The honesty should have comforted her. It did not. It scraped. Rosamund had spent years being suspected of wanting what other women possessed, because poverty made every need look like ambition. Now courage itself had been turned into evidence against her. Then allow me to spare you one conclusion, Your Grace. I saved your horse. I did not propose to your title. The dowager's eyes flashed toward her son. Sebastian absorbed the blow without flinching. I did not say you did. No. You only asked questions until the shape of accusation entered the room and sat beside us. A flush rose along his cheekbones, not of embarrassment, but of restrained anger at himself or at her. Perhaps both. Lady Rosamund, if someone staged this, then you are in danger as much as my household is. And if you decide I staged it, then I would be a fool, the dowager said crisply. Mother, no, Sebastian. You wanted plain answers. Here is one. A woman intent on trapping a duke does not risk her neck before 200 witnesses, and then ask whether a horse has married her by accident. Rosamund sat again because her legs had begun to tremble at last. The dowager placed a hand briefly over her uninjured one. It was not soft comfort. It was acknowledgement. Sebastian looked at that hand, then at Rosamund's face. Until I know who did this, I will not allow your name to be shredded in my ballroom. You cannot command gossip. No, but I can make it expensive. For the first time, Rosamund understood why powerful men frightened society, even when they spoke quietly. "What do you intend?" she asked. "A temporary public understanding," he said. "Nothing binding without your consent. Nothing that claims more than protection while the matter is investigated. My mother will chaperone you. You will remain at Harrowmere tonight, and tomorrow I will send word to any house that matters that Lady Rosamund Vale acted with courage and is under the protection of House Harrow." She heard the offer. She also heard the cage inside it. "And if I refuse, then I will have my carriage take you wherever you wish, and I will still defend your name." That answer unsettled her more than pressure would have done. Sir Edmund would have demanded gratitude. Clarissa would have disguised contempt as concern. Sebastian gave her a choice, and looked as if choice cost him dearly. Before Rosamund could speak, voices rose in the corridor. Sir Edmund's tone cut through the door, smooth with false distress. "My cousin has always been impressionable. His Grace must understand that reduced circumstances make a lady vulnerable to reckless hopes." Rosamund closed her eyes. The dowager's hand tightened around her cane. Sebastian turned toward the door, and the coldness that entered his face made the candle flames seem smaller. He opened it before Sir Edmund finished speaking. The corridor beyond held Clarissa, Sir Edmund, Mrs. Havers, and several guests who had clearly drifted too close in search of truth they could season into rumor. Sebastian stood in the doorway, broad enough to block them all. "Sir Edmund," he said, "you will not explain Lady Rosamund to me as though she were an unpaid account." Sir Edmund paled. Clarissa's gaze slid past the Duke to Rosamund's bandaged hand and the glove fragment on the tray. Her brows lifted with delicate concern. "Oh dear," she said softly. "How unfortunate that proof should look so intimate." Rosamund felt every eye turn toward the torn glove. Sebastian heard the whisper beginning before it was born. He stepped aside just enough for Rosamund to be seen, not hidden. "The proof," he said, "is that someone touched what belongs to my stable, endangered a child, and attempted to stain a lady's courage with suspicion." Clarissa's smile faded. Sebastian looked from face to face. "Lady Rosamund remains at Harrowmere under my mother's chaperonage until the truth is known. Anyone who calls that arrangement scandal will answer to me." The corridor went still. Rosamund stood behind him, visible and trembling, but not alone. For one dangerous heartbeat, she almost allowed herself to believe that protection and respect could stand in the same room. Then she saw Clarissa's eyes lower to the torn glove, and the faintest smile returned to her mouth. The night had not ended. It had only chosen its next lie. By midnight, the hunt ball had ended without music, supper, or the graceful lies by which society pretended not to be cruel. Carriages rolled from Harrowmere Hall under Sebastian's order, only after each guest had given his name to the steward, and each groom had been questioned, far from the reach of gossip. Rosamund watched the last lantern vanish down the drive from the blue withdrawing room, still wearing the Duke's coat, because no one had returned her own wrap from the cloakroom, and because the dowager had looked at her once and said, "Keep it until you stop shaking." Rosamund had not known she was shaking until then. Now the house had grown quiet around her. Quiet did not mean peace. It meant every whisper had gone elsewhere to breed. Across the room, the Dowager Duchess sat with a cup of untasted tea, her cane resting beside her chair, like a weapon that had been polite long enough. Sebastian stood near the mantel, fully dressed again in another dark coat brought by his valet, but he seemed no less dangerous for being restored to formality. On the small table between them lay the pieces of the night, her torn riding glove, the leather fragment found near the strap, the cut girth, a folded note Mr. Dawlish had just delivered from the hall table, where it had been discovered beneath a silver salver after the guests departed. Sebastian had not opened it yet. Rosamund could not stop looking at it. "You should sleep," the dowager said. "One says that to ladies after disaster, as if sleep were an obedient maid." Rosamund folded her bandaged hand in her lap. "I am not certain disaster has finished with me, Your Grace. It rarely has such manners. Sebastian reached for the note. This was addressed to me. Then open it, his mother said, unless you intend to intimidate it into confession. He broke the seal. There was no crest, no scent, no signet, only cheap paper and a hand disguised with stiff, ugly strokes. His face changed as he read. It did not soften. It shut. Rosamund felt the room grow colder. What does it say? She asked. Sebastian set the note on the table between them. The words were few enough for everyone to read. Warhorses can be taught to kneel. For several seconds, no one spoke. The fire snapped once in the grate. Rosamund's throat tightened, not with fear alone, but with insult. Someone had turned Valor's terror, the page's danger, and her desperate ride into a stage trick. Worse, someone wanted the Duke to believe she was clever enough to plan it, and foolish enough to leave proof behind. That was not written by a servant, she said. Sebastian's eyes lifted. Why? A servant wishing to protect himself would accuse someone plainly. This note does not accuse. It provokes. It wants your grace to imagine the rest. You read malice well. I have had instruction. The answer escaped quietly. Sebastian heard it. So did his mother. He looked toward her bandaged hand. Lady Rosamund, if this is an attempt to stain you, remaining in this house may make you a larger target. Leaving tonight would make me look guilty. Yes. Staying makes me look ambitious. Yes. Then society has been generous enough to offer ruin in both directions. The dowager gave a dry little hum of approval. Sebastian did not smile, but some of the iron left his mouth. That is why we require terms. Rosamund straightened. Terms for your protection, for my household, for the investigation, and for your reputation, she asked. Yes. His honesty disarmed her more effectively than any gallantry could have done. I will not pretend otherwise. A duke who allows his own stable to be sabotaged and a lady's name to be shredded beneath his roof has failed at more than hospitality. You did not cut the strap. No, but Harrowmere is mine. The weight in the words was not pride. It was burden. Rosamund looked at him then, truly looked, and saw a man who had spent too long believing every room, every servant, every horse, every heirloom, and every life beneath his roof must be held in his hands or lost. No wonder his hand stayed near his side like a soldier waiting for a command. The dowager leaned back. Begin clearly, Sebastian. Ladies dislike being rescued into fog. He accepted the rebuke. The public explanation will be this. House Harrow considers you under its protection until the truth of tonight is known. My mother will chaperone you. You will occupy the East Guest Chamber. You will receive no gentleman privately, including me. You will answer no letter or caller connected to tonight, without my mother or Mrs. Dawlish present. In public, we will maintain that the old custom creates an understanding of honor, not an engagement forced by law or claim. Rosamund listened for the trap. She found several doors that might become one, and privately, you owe me nothing beyond truth. That is a large word from a man who does not yet know whether to believe me. His jaw tightened. I know you did not write that note. Do you know I did not cut the strap? Silence. It was not long, but it was enough. No, not yet. The answer hurt. Because it was honest, it hurt cleanly. Rosamund rose, careful of her hand. Then here is my first term. You will not speak to me as if suspicion gives you ownership of my dignity. The dowager's eyes sharpened with interest. Sebastian's face remained still. Agreed. Second. You will not compensate Sir Edmund for me, as if I were damaged property. Agreed. Third. If anyone asks whether I trapped you, you will say I saved a boy and your horse. You may say the rest is being investigated. You will not imply I am grateful for being tolerated. Agreed? Fourth. Her voice nearly faltered there, but she held it. If you discover I am innocent, you will say it before the people who hear the accusation. Something moved through his expression, quick and dark. Yes, the simplicity of that promise struck harder than ornament would have done. Rosamund sat again before her knees betrayed how much it mattered. Sebastian looked at her as if she had handed him, not demands, but a map of injuries he had not earned, and therefore did not know how to avoid. My turn, he said. You will not go near the stables alone. I was not alone tonight. There were dozens of people refusing to help. That is not an answer. No, Your Grace. It is a distinction. The dowager covered her mouth with her teacup. Sebastian breathed once through his nose. You will not go near the stables without my permission or my head groom's escort. I will accept the head groom's escort. I will not ask your permission to walk in a house where I am already accused of plotting to enter it. Lady Rosamund, Your Grace. The fire popped again. The dowager set down her cup. Compromise before you both declare war over a horse door. Sebastian's gaze stayed on Rosamund. Very well. You may visit Valor with Dawlish informed and a groom present. Agreed. You will tell me if Sir Edmund threatens you. The room narrowed. Rosamund glanced away. Sir Edmund speaks as many men speak when they hold the purse, and not the affection. That was not agreement. No. His voice dropped. Does he control your allowance? He administers what remains of my father's settlement through a family arrangement that grows smaller every quarter. That is not the same as guardianship. No, it is merely dependence dressed in better gloves. Sebastian looked at the torn pair on the table. Then he will not negotiate over you. He will try. Then he will fail. The words were spoken without flourish, but Rosamund felt them somewhere beneath the ribs. Protection again. Dangerous. Tempting. She had to keep it from becoming a pillow she leaned upon until she could no longer stand. I have another term, she said. If this arrangement continues, you will allow me to understand the evidence. I will not be placed in a room to wait while men decide whether my name survives. Sebastian's eyes met hers. You wish to assist. I wish not to be buried alive beneath concern. For the first time that night, something like respect became unmistakable in his face. Agreed. A knock sounded before the moment could settle. The door opened without waiting for permission, which meant Sir Edmund had decided outrage could replace manners. He entered with Mrs. Havers behind him, and a footman hovering helplessly in the corridor. Sir Edmund bowed to the Duke and Dowager, then turned upon Rosamund with injured authority. My dear cousin, there you are. We must leave at once. Rosamund stood. Leave? Naturally. This house is no longer suitable for you. The appearance of the matter is intolerable. I have already endured comments suggesting you have placed yourself in a position no modest woman would choose. Sebastian's gaze cooled. Choose your next words carefully. Sir Edmund swallowed, then smiled. Your Grace misunderstands me. I seek only to preserve her. Lady Rosamund is of a sensitive disposition and reduced means. She may not comprehend how easily hope can be mistaken for design. Rosamund felt the old humiliation approach like a familiar carriage. Reduced means, sensitive disposition, hope. Words men used when they wanted a woman to disappear, without making them seem cruel. I comprehend perfectly, she said. Sir Edmund blinked. Rosamund. Lady Rosamund, Sebastian said. Sir Edmund's face tightened. The correction landed before everyone in the room. Rosamund had never loved her title. It had brought her little shelter. Yet in Sebastian's mouth, it became a door closed against contempt. Sir Edmund recovered with effort. As her nearest male relation, I must insist. You are not her guardian, Sebastian said. You are a trustee of a diminishing allowance, if I understand correctly. Colour drained from Sir Edmund's cheeks. Rosamund's heart gave a startled beat. She had not expected the Duke to use the truth so quickly. Family matters are delicate, Sir Edmund said. Not when brought into my drawing room as leverage. The Dowager lifted her cane an inch. Sir Edmund. Lady Rosamund remains here under my chaperonage. If you object, you may send a letter in the morning. I shall read it when I require amusement. Mrs. Havers made a faint choking sound. Sir Edmund looked from the Dowager to Sebastian, and understood that rank had closed over him like a gate. Then his eyes found Rosamund. The smile he gave her was small and private, which made it worse than anger. Very well, stay, if you must. But remember, cousin, generosity has limits. London has fewer doors than women imagine once their names grow inconvenient. Rosamund's fingers curled into her skirt. Sebastian took one step forward, but she spoke before he could. Then I shall learn which doors were never worth entering. Sir Edmund stared at her. The words had been quiet, but they had not been obedient. That was enough. He bowed stiffly and withdrew with Mrs. Havers rustling after him. The door closed. Rosamund remained standing until she trusted herself to sit. Sebastian did not praise her. Somehow, that was kinder. He simply turned the anonymous note face down on the table, as if denying it the right to look at her. "Tomorrow," he said, "we begin with the stables, the guest list, and anyone who had cause to fear you being seen." "Fear me?" Rosamund asked. "I was invisible yesterday." "No," Sebastian said, his gaze on the torn glove. "You were unnoticed. That is not the same thing." Before she could answer, the corridor clock struck one. Somewhere far below, in the direction of the mews, a horse stamped once against wood. Rosamund looked toward the sound. The night had given her a scandal, an enemy, and an agreement with a man she did not entirely trust. It had also given her one thing she had not possessed when she entered Harrowmere Hall: a place to stand. By 10 o'clock the next morning, Harrowmere Hall had become the most desirable house in Hampshire for everyone who claimed they had no desire to pry. Calling cards arrived in a silver heap. Carriage wheels grated over the drive. Ladies who had departed the hunt ball pale with alarm now returned wrapped in velvet pelisses and moral concern, which was society's preferred costume for curiosity. Rosamund stood in the east guest chamber while the dowager's maid fastened the last hook of a borrowed grey morning gown that fit almost well enough to be merciful. Her own blue dress had been taken away to be brushed, and Sebastian's coat had been returned at dawn by a footman who handled it as if it were evidence in a trial no one had named. On the dressing table lay her torn riding glove, cleaned but unrepaired, its missing piece a dark absence near the thumb. Rosamund looked at it longer than she meant to. Last night, it had been memory. This morning it was accusation. The dowager entered without knocking, which Rosamund was beginning to understand was not rudeness in her, but strategy. "You will receive callers in the green drawing-room." Rosamund turned. "Must I? No. You may hide in your chamber while they decide the shape of your guilt without the inconvenience of your presence." "The green drawing-room, then. Excellent. Wear the glove." Rosamund looked down. "Your Grace, it is torn. So is the story they are telling about you. Let them see which one holds better." The green drawing-room overlooked the south lawn, where frost still silvered the grass beneath a pale winter sun. It was a pretty room, all pale silk walls and gilt chairs, but by 10:30 it had become a battlefield arranged around teacups. Lady Clarissa Penworth arrived with her mother, Lady Penworth, and 3 women whose names Rosamund had heard attached to every scandal in 2 counties. Mrs. Havers sat near the window, pretending to embroider while storing every word for Sir Edmund. The dowager presided near the fire. Sebastian stood by the mantel with the stillness of a man who would rather face cannon smoke than morning calls. Rosamund sat beside the tea table with her bandaged hand hidden in her lap, and the torn riding glove resting where everyone could see it. The first few remarks were harmless only in grammar. Lady Westlake asked after her nerves. Mrs. Fenton declared that horses were noble creatures when properly managed. Lady Penworth said accidents were so revealing of character, though she did not specify whose. Clarissa waited until tea had been poured before she smiled at Rosamund. "I trust you slept, Lady Rosamund. After such an unusual display, one imagines the mind must race." "I slept enough, thank you. How admirable. I should not have closed my eyes if I had ridden a duke's horse through his ballroom." A little laugh passed around the room. Rosamund lifted her cup. "Then it is fortunate you were not required to do so." Clarissa's smile thinned. "Required is a strong word. Some might say you acted before thinking." "I did think. Of the boy, naturally. Of the boy first. Then of the horse. Then of the fact that shouting men were making both worse." Sebastian's gaze moved from the mantel to her face. The room noticed. Clarissa noticed most of all. "How extraordinary that you know so much about such matters," she said. "It gives one a very rustic education. My father taught me." "Ah yes, Captain Vale. A cavalryman, was he not?" "He was." "Then perhaps that explains your confidence with saddles and straps. Though confidence can be dangerous in a lady when it outruns judgment." Rosamund felt the old instinct rise. the desire to become smaller until no one could strike. She placed her teacup down carefully. Confidence did not cut Valour's girth. The room stilled. Lady Penworth's brows lifted. My dear, no one suggested you cut it. Not allowed. The dowager's cane tapped once. Approval or warning, perhaps both. Clarissa leaned back, her expression sweet again. Forgive me if I seem clumsy. I only meant that few ladies could have recognized such a thing so quickly. One almost wonders how you knew where to look. The attack was delicate. That made it uglier. Rosamund felt several women lean inward. Not with their bodies, but with attention. Sebastian moved from the mantel at last. Lady Rosamund, he said. Will you explain what you saw when you reached Valour? Clarissa's eyes brightened, as if she expected him to demand a defense. Rosamund looked at him. He was not rescuing her. He was offering them more frightening. Yes, Your Grace. She turned toward the ladies. Valour was not vicious. He was frightened and overstimulated. His cheek strap had been twisted, and one rein was low enough to catch beneath his foreleg. The saddle had shifted because the girth had been weakened. If I had tried to pull hard from the ground, he might have fought the bit and hurt himself or the child. Once I was mounted, I could give him a direction. Mrs. Fenton blinked. You speak as if the horse were a gentleman at a dinner table. Horses are often more honest than gentlemen at dinner tables. The dowager lowered her eyes to her tea. Sebastian's mouth did not smile. But the room felt the pressure of one nearly forming. Clarissa saw it and sharpened. And the kneeling? I did not ask him to kneel. But you had heard of the custom? No, not even from a groom, a maid? A charming old housekeeper eager for romance? No, Clarissa sighed gently. How strange, a custom known to the oldest servants, yet unknown to the lady it elevated. Not elevated, Rosamund said. Endangered. The word landed. Even Lady Westlake stopped stirring her tea. Rosamund had not meant to say it so plainly, but now that the truth was in the room, she would not chase after it and apologize. Lady Clarissa, last night did not make me safe, it made me visible. Those are not the same thing. Sebastian looked at her then with such direct attention that her pulse stumbled. It was not admiration exactly. It was recognition, and recognition was harder to bear in a room built for judgment. Lady Penworth closed her fan. Visibility is not always a misfortune to an unmarried lady. It is when it comes before trust, Rosamund replied. Mrs. Havers made a tiny sound near the window, somewhere between horror and warning. Clarissa's eyes cooled. How profound. Though one hopes trust may be earned, not merely demanded because one has made an impressive entrance, Sebastian's voice cut in, quiet and unmistakable. Trust is not earned by cruelty either. Clarissa turned to him with a wounded smile. Your Grace, I meant no cruelty. Then you will find it easy to avoid. Silence held the room for 2 full seconds. Then the dowager set down her cup. Lady Rosamund has answered, with more clarity than any of you deserve. We shall now discuss something less vulgar than suspicion. Lady Westlake, your daughter's engagement. Is the young man still as dull as he was at Michaelmas? The room obeyed, because the dowager made obedience feel like survival. Conversation shifted, but its edges remained sharp. Rosamund breathed slowly and kept her hands still. She had not won, not in any lasting way. But she had spoken, and no one had made her apologize for the sound of her own voice. When the visitors finally rose, Clarissa paused beside Rosamund's chair. Her perfume drifted close, expensive and floral, with a faint French brightness that pricked Rosamund's memory. You are braver than I expected, Clarissa murmured. That's kind of you to say. It wasn't kindness. Rosamund looked up. Clarissa's smile remained perfect for the room. Bravery makes people careless. Do remember that. She moved away before Rosamund could answer. Within minutes, the drawing room emptied into rustling skirts and departing concern. The dowager was called aside by the housekeeper. Sebastian was stopped near the hall by Mr. Dawlish, who spoke in a low voice about the guest list. Rosamund stepped toward the side corridor to clear her head and nearly collided with a thin boy carrying a coal scuttle too large for his arms. He looked no more than 12, with red ears, frightened eyes, and a cap crushed in one hand. She recognized him at once. Not the page who had fallen, but another stable lad who had stood near the mews last night. "Forgive me," she said softly. "I did not see you." The boy glanced behind him. "Beg pardon, my lady." He started to flee. Rosamund lowered her voice. "You were in the stable yard last night, were you not?" His face drained. "I didn't do nothing. I did not say you did. I wasn't near the strap. What is your name?" "Tom Willis, my lady." "Tom, did you see someone who was?" The boy's fingers tightened around the cap. Footsteps sounded somewhere beyond the corridor. He leaned closer, words tumbling out in a whisper. "I saw lace, my lady, at the stall door. Ladies' lace, not maids. White cuff with little silver flowers. I thought it strange, but Mr. Pike told me to mind the lanterns, and then Valor started up." Rosamund's heart quickened. "Whose cuff?" "I don't know. I only saw the sleeve when she pulled back." "Did you tell Mr. Dawlish?" Terror flashed across his face. "I can't. I mean, I shouldn't. They'll say I was where I wasn't meant to be." "Who will?" The footsteps came nearer. Tom looked past her and went rigid. "Please, my lady, don't say I told." He slipped around her and darted through the service door before she could stop him. Rosamund turned toward the main hall. Clarissa stood at the far end, near a marble-topped table, drawing on her gloves while her mother spoke to a footman. At her wrist, beneath the edge of her pelisse, showed a narrow band of white lace embroidered with tiny silver flowers. The same French perfume lingered in the corridor. Rosamund felt the morning tilt beneath her feet. She looked back at the service door. It had already swung shut. When Mr. Dawlish came to summon Tom Willis, 5 minutes later, the boy was gone. The news that Tom Willis had vanished reached Sebastian before luncheon. But the first printed lie about Rosamund reached the servants' hall before tea. It came folded into a gossip sheet carried from the village by a scullery maid who had meant only to amuse the kitchen, and instead froze every tongue in the house. By the time Mr. Dawlish brought it to the Duke, the phrase had already begun its ugly little journey from pantry to passage. The stable duchess. Rosamund read the words only because Sebastian did not hide the paper quickly enough when she entered the library with the dowager. He had been standing by the long table, one hand flat upon the sheet, his face so still that any stranger might have mistaken restraint for indifference. Rosamund did not. She had begun to understand that the quieter he became, the more carefully the world should tread around him. "Is that about me?" she asked. The dowager's eyes narrowed. "Nothing in that rag is about anyone. It is about feeding bored people with poisoned crumbs." Sebastian folded the paper once. "You need not read it. Then it is about me." He looked at her, and for a moment the command in him warred with the promise he had made the night before. She saw the instant he remembered. He placed the sheet on the table. Rosamund stepped forward and read enough. Not all. Enough. It described her ride as theatrical, her stay at Harrowmere as convenient, and her knowledge of horses as unfeminine, in a tone that made courage sound like appetite. The words did not strike as sharply as she expected. Perhaps because insult had a limit when it repeated itself too often. Perhaps because the handwriting of cruelty was always recognizable, even when printed. "Stable duchess," she said. "At least it is shorter than poor relation." Sebastian's expression tightened. "Do not make a jest of what they have done to you." "I am not jesting. I am ranking the insults by efficiency." The dowager gave a dry cough that might have hidden approval. Sebastian did not move. "Tom Willis is missing." The jest went out of her at once. "Since when?" "Since shortly after you spoke with him." Rosamund felt the room narrow. "Then someone saw us, possibly. Or he was frightened by what he told me. Also possible. He mentioned a lace cuff with silver flowers. Dawlish told me." She met his eyes. "I saw such a cuff on Lady Clarissa." Sebastian's jaw hardened. "Did anyone else see it?" "Not that I know. Then we need more than resemblance." "I know." The answer came too quickly. And he heard the bruise inside it. He softened his tone by force, which somehow made it rougher. "I do not doubt what you saw. I doubt what society will accept from you if we cannot prove it." That distinction mattered. Rosamund wished it did not matter quite so much. The dowager rose with her cane. If you two have finished stepping carefully around each other, go to the mews. Valor trusts the lady. The lady notices what terrified men miss. And Sebastian, if you attempt to forbid her because the air is damp, I shall remind you in public that you once rode through rain for 3 days and called it refreshing. Mother, yes dear, that is the sound of your defeat. Rosamund should have objected to being sent anywhere with the Duke, but the Dowager sent Mrs. Dawlish with them, and propriety settled around the expedition like a stiff cloak. The mews smelled of hay, leather, clean straw, and the sharp medicinal tang of liniment. Outside, the afternoon had turned grey, with a cold wind moving across the yard and rattling the bare branches beyond the stable roof. A groom stood near the entrance, but he lowered his eyes when Sebastian passed, as if the household itself had been shamed by the printed lie. No servant is to blame himself for a newspaper, Sebastian said without stopping. The groom looked up, startled. Yes, your grace. Rosamund heard the effect of those few words. Respect could be given as quietly as punishment. Valor stood in the largest stall at the end of the row, his black coat brushed to a low shine, his ears flicking at every sound. The moment Rosamund entered, he lifted his head. He did not start, he watched. Sebastian paused outside the stall door. He knows you. He knows my hands were not cruel. That is not a small thing. She glanced at him. The line of his profile was hard against the stable light. Were yours? The question came before caution could stop it. Mrs. Dawlish made a faint movement behind them, but Sebastian did not look offended. He looked, for one brief second, tired beyond title. Not to him. He opened the lower half of the stall door and entered first. Valor touched his muzzle to Sebastian's shoulder, and something in the Duke changed. Not visibly enough for the world. Enough for Rosamund. His hand rose to the horse's neck, with an old familiarity that held no performance. He carried me away from Waterloo, Sebastian said. Not all the way. No story is that clean. But far enough. Rosamund stayed at the door. You do not have to tell me, I know. He stroked Valor's neck once, slow and firm. He was younger then, so was I. There was smoke, noise, mud up to the fetlocks, and men shouting names no one answered. I had been separated from my regiment. My left leg would not obey me. Valor should have bolted like any sensible creature. Instead, he stood until I caught the saddle. His voice did not break. That made the memory heavier. Afterward, people called him a warhorse, as if bravery were a breed. He is only a horse. He trusts what he trusts. Last night, someone used that trust against him. Rosamund stepped closer, and against you. His hand stilled. Yes, that is why you looked so angry at the strap. I was angry before the strap. He turned his head slightly. When you ran, I thought I was watching another person move beyond my reach while I stood too far away to stop disaster. The words fell between them, unadorned and almost too intimate because they were not romantic. They were true. Rosamund looked at Valor because looking at Sebastian had become difficult. You did move. After you. Someone had to be first. A faint, humorless breath left him. You say that as if it is simple. No. I say it as someone who has spent years being told to wait for permission. Last night, there was no time to ask. Valor nudged her sleeve. She lifted her bandaged hand slowly, letting him scent her before she touched him. His breath warmed the torn seam of the old glove. Sebastian watched the movement with such attention that her pulse became annoyingly present. Your hand pains you, he said. Only when people mention it. Then I shall be silent. That would make you the first person in England to heal an injury by restraint. His mouth almost curved. Before he could answer, Valor tossed his head toward the feed bin and stamped once. Not panic, discomfort. Rosamund turned. Has he eaten, little? Sebastian said. He looked toward the groom. Pike? The head groom came forward at once. He knows the mash, your grace, then left it. I thought mayhap he was unsettled after last night. Rosamund moved to the feed bucket. May I? Sebastian nodded. She crouched and examined the mash without touching it at first. Oats, bran, chopped carrot, dampened as expected. Yet beneath the stable smells lay a sweet, bitter scent. Familiar but wrong here. She looked at Sebastian. Do you smell that? He came beside her. close enough that the sleeve of his coat brushed her shoulder, then went utterly still. Laudanum. Pike swore under his breath, then immediately looked horrified. Beg pardon, my lady. Rosamund barely heard him. Enough to frighten him, to confuse him. Sebastian's face had gone cold. Enough to make a sensitive horse unsteady, especially if given with a loose strap and noise. Then last night was not only the girth. No, the word was quiet and lethal. Mrs. Dawlish crossed herself softly near the door. Sebastian lifted the bucket away with his own hands and gave it to Pike. Lock this in the tack room. No one touches it except Dawlish or me. Send for Mr. Larkin and have every feed bin checked. Pike nodded and hurried out. Rosamund remained crouched a moment longer, then noticed the latch on the inner stable door. A faint smear shone on the dark iron, not oil, too delicate. She stood and leaned closer. The same bright floral scent from the corridor brushed the air. French perfume. Your Grace, she said. Sebastian was already watching her. What have you found? The latch. He bent near it without touching. Perfume. Lady Clarissa wore the same scent this morning. Many ladies wear French scent, with lace cuffs embroidered in silver flowers. His eyes shifted to hers. The space between them tightened, not with doubt this time, with recognition of a path beginning to form. You are certain? He asked. I am certain of what I saw and smelled. I am not certain of what can be proven. It is miserably said. A low sound escaped him, almost a laugh, but too brief to become one. Yes. For a moment they stood together beside the stall, the injured horse breathing behind them, the hidden poison before them, and the name of a beautiful woman neither of them yet had the power to accuse. Rosamund felt the strange shape of their alliance settle more firmly. It was not trust, not fully. It was something built under pressure, like a bridge laid plank by plank over dangerous water. Sebastian reached toward the latch, then stopped and took a clean cloth from a shelf instead, wrapping the metal before lifting it from its hook. You noticed what every man in this stable missed. Because every man in this stable was looking for a culprit with dirty hands. And you? She looked at the faint scent-marked smear. I am looking for someone whose hands are always clean. Footsteps sounded outside. Mr. Dawlish appeared at the entrance, breathless in the controlled manner of a very proper steward who had been forced to hurry. Your Grace. Sebastian turned. What is it? Tom Willis has not been found. But one of the undermaids saw him near the south gate before noon. He was speaking with a gentleman's manservant. Whose? Dawlish hesitated. Sir Edmund Vale's, Your Grace. Rosamund felt the cold reach her before the open stable door could. Sebastian looked at her, and this time there was no suspicion in his face, only a terrible understanding. Lady Rosamund, he said quietly, I believe your cousin has more to explain than his concern. Valor stamped once behind them, hard enough to rattle the stall door. The sound echoed down the mews like a warning. By the time Sebastian's carriage turned into King Street, 2 evenings later, Rosamund understood that scandal did not fade when fed with silence. It sharpened. Harrowmere Hall had held its breath for 48 hours, while Mr. Dawlish searched for Tom Willis, while the head groom locked away the tainted mash, and while the Dowager Duchess answered every impertinent note with a degree of courtesy that made the recipients feel worse than a direct insult. Yet London had already chosen its entertainment. The girl with the torn glove, the Duke's horse, the old custom, the whisper that a poor relation had ridden her way into the highest rank in the room. Rosamund sat across from Sebastian and his mother, her gloved hands folded over the pale muslin of her gown. The Dowager had insisted she attend Almack's. If you hide, she had said, fastening a small silver horsehead pin at Rosamund's shoulder, they will call it guilt. If you appear, they will call it audacity. Choose the sin with better posture. Sebastian had said almost nothing during the drive. He looked out at the lamps passing through the carriage window, his profile cut in shadow and cold gold. Once, as the wheels struck a rut, his hand moved as if to steady her, then stopped before the gesture became too intimate. Rosamund saw the restraint. She wished she had not. It was easier to defend herself against suspicion than against a kindness that did not know whether it was permitted to exist. "You need not answer anyone tonight," he said at last. "I can answer questions." "Your Grace, that is not what I meant." "I know." The dowager's cane rested between them like a judge. "Then both of you might try speaking in the words you mean before Almax does it for you." Sebastian looked at Rosamund. "If anyone insults you, I will intervene. If anyone insults me, allow me the dignity of hearing it first." His eyes darkened. "That is a hard request." "Most fair requests are hard for someone." The carriage slowed. Outside, white-gloved footmen moved among arriving equipages, and the pale facade of Almax gleamed beneath the lamps, with all the innocence of a building that had destroyed countless hopes with polite refusals. Rosamund stepped down with the dowager at her side and Sebastian behind her, and the hush began before she reached the entrance. It travelled inward like a draught. Fans paused. Heads turned. A girl near the stairs whispered too loudly, "That is her." Rosamund kept walking. Every lesson of poverty had trained her for this. Do not stumble. Do not clutch your skirt. Do not look for mercy in people who enjoy withholding it. The assembly rooms were bright, overheated, and mercilessly elegant. The patronesses sat in authority near the side, while mothers managed daughters as if arranging porcelain for purchase. No one spoke openly at first. They only made space in the cruelest possible way, stepping aside so Rosamund could feel the emptiness around her. Sebastian offered his arm. She hesitated only a breath before placing her hand upon it. The room felt the movement, so did she. "They are watching your hand," she murmured. "Let them." That sounds very ducal. It was intended to sound reassuring. Then it was very nearly a success. His mouth moved, not quite a smile. And the moment might have warmed if Lady Clarissa Penworth had not appeared before them, in white silk and silver net, her lace cuffs arranged with exquisite care. "Your Grace," she said, "Lady Rosamund. How brave of you to come." "Good evening, Lady Clarissa," Rosamund replied. Bravery is a generous description for accepting a voucher. Clarissa's eyes flicked to the silver pin at Rosamund's shoulder. "And yet generosity seems to surround you at present." Sebastian's hand tightened beneath Rosamund's fingers. Before he could speak, a stir rose near the patronesses. A footman had entered with a folded paper on a tray, which was improper enough to attract notice and formal enough to command it. One of the older ladies frowned as he bent to speak. A moment later, the paper changed hands, then changed faces. Rosamund felt something pass through the room before she understood it. Curiosity first, then delight disguised as alarm, then hunger. Lady Westlake lifted a hand to her mouth. Mrs. Fenton leaned toward Lady Penworth. Clarissa became very still. Sebastian noticed. "What is it?" he asked. No one answered him. A gentleman near the card-room laughed once, then remembered himself too late. The paper reached Lord Halberry, who read it with theatrical reluctance. "This concerns his Grace," he said. "And Lady Rosamund, I fear." Sebastian's voice was quiet. "Bring it here." Lord Halberry looked toward the patronesses as if rank might save him from obedience. It did not. He brought the letter. Sebastian unfolded it. Rosamund watched his face as he read, and that was how she knew the words were worse than gossip. Not because he grew angry, because his expression lost all warmth. "Read it aloud," Clarissa said softly. "If Lady Rosamund is innocent, secrecy can't help her." The room waited. Sebastian lowered the paper. No, the refusal should have protected Rosamund. Instead, it condemned her by omission. Someone whispered, "Then it is true." Rosamund reached for the letter. "May I see it?" Sebastian hesitated. That hesitation did what no accusation had yet accomplished. It wounded her in public. He handed it to her. The handwriting was disguised, but the malice was familiar. To the patronesses of Almax, it began. "Since society is being asked to honor a grotesque understanding between the Duke of Alder-mere and Lady Rosamund Vale, it ought to know what Harrowmere hides. Lady Rosamund has long possessed knowledge of horse handling through her late father. She boasted within her own family that generosity has limits, and that a clever woman must make her own fortune before doors close. She studied the harrow custom, trained the beast to kneel, and staged her display before witnesses. Those who pity her reduced state should ask whether pity has made fools of them all. Rosamund stopped reading, not because the rest was worse, because 3 words had struck like a bell inside her. Generosity has limits. Sir Edmund had said them in the corridor at Harrowmere, privately enough that only those close by could have heard. Her eyes lifted. Across the room, Lady Clarissa watched her with tender concern. Sir Edmund stood not far behind Lady Penworth, though Rosamund had not known he had been admitted that evening. He looked grave, almost sorrowful. That was how she knew. He had helped make the noose and now meant to mourn the hanging. Lady Rosamund, one of the patronesses, said, "Is there any explanation?" Rosamund could have spoken. She could have named the phrase. She could have described lace cuffs, perfume, laudanum, and a missing stable boy. Yet proof scattered in private became desperation in public. She felt Sebastian beside her, powerful enough to silence every person present, and not certain enough to save her without making the scandal permanent. Clarissa moved closer. No one wishes to be unkind. But surely even His Grace must see that withdrawal would be wiser until this unfortunate matter is resolved. The word withdrawal entered the room like a prepared remedy. People accepted it before Sebastian spoke. Rosamund turned to him slowly. "Your Grace." He looked at her, and she saw conflict tear through his restraint. "Protect her," his face said. "Stop the blood before society spills all of it." Lady Rosamund acted with courage at Harrowmere, he said to the room. "That has not changed. A murmur, not enough." "However," he continued, and Rosamund's heart seemed to step backward from him before her body did, "until this forged accusation is disproved, House Harrow will withdraw the public understanding attached to the old custom. Lady Rosamund remains under my protection, but no expectation shall be placed upon her name." The room exhaled. Some heard nobility, some heard doubt. Rosamund heard the door close. He had meant to free her from pressure. Instead, he had separated himself from her where everyone could see. Clarissa lowered her eyes. "How honourable, Your Grace." Rosamund looked at the letter again. The paper trembled only slightly in her hand. She folded it with care and returned it to Sebastian. Then she unpinned the small silver horsehead from her shoulder. The dowager made a sharp sound, almost a warning. Rosamund ignored it, because if she looked at the old woman's kindness, she might break. She placed the pin in Sebastian's palm. His fingers closed around it reflexively. "Lady Rosamund," he said, too low for the room, but not low enough to spare her. "Do not do this here." "You have already done it here." Pain moved across his face too late. She stepped back and dipped into a curtsy so precise that not one woman in the room could call it improper. "Your Grace has been very generous." His face changed at the word. "Good, let him hear it. Let him remember that generosity had limits when trust did not stand beside it." Sir Edmund approached at once. All wounded family devotion. "Rosamund, my dear, come away." She turned on him, and the air around them seemed to draw tight. "Do not call me dear when you have never found me valuable except in distress." His mouth opened, several ladies gasped. Rosamund did not wait for permission to leave. She walked from the assembly room with the torn glove hidden beneath her fan, and the gaze of London striking her back like cold rain. No one stopped her. Not Sir Edmund, not Clarissa, not even Sebastian. Only when she reached the corridor did she press one hand against the wall, not because she was faint, but because rage required something solid. Behind her, the music resumed too soon. Society was always eager to dance after it had finished judging. Mrs. Dawlish appeared, breathless and pale, sent no doubt by the dowager. "My lady." "His Grace," said the carriage. "No." Rosamund lifted her head. "Send for a chair to take me to my modiste in Bond Street tomorrow morning. Then find out where Lady Clarissa dismisses her maids." Mrs. Dawlish stared. "My lady?" Rosamund looked back toward the closed doors of Almack's. Her humiliation was still inside, being passed from mouth to mouth. Let them have it for one night. Tomorrow, she would begin taking back the truth. "If they wish to make me the author of this scandal," she said, "I had better learn to read every hand that wrote it. By morning, Rosamund had learned that humiliation left no bruise society could be made to see, which was why she dressed with particular care before going out to find evidence instead. The gown the dowager lent her was dark green wool, plain enough for Bond Street in daylight, and fine enough that no shopwoman could dismiss her as a poor relation at first glance. Mrs. Dawlish came as chaperone, stern-faced beneath a black bonnet, and said nothing when Rosamund tucked her torn riding glove into her reticule. The silver horsehead pin was gone. Its absence felt like a small wound at her shoulder, but she refused to touch the place where it had been. Sebastian had withdrawn the public understanding before all of Almack's. He had called the letter forged, yes, and he had meant to protect her, yet he had still stepped away where everyone could see. Intent did not erase impact. When the hired chair carried her through the London streets, Rosamund watched ladies pass in bright ribbons, and gentlemen lift hats to women, whose names had not been printed as jokes. She felt no wish to disappear. That surprised her. Shame had always made her smaller. Last night, shame had burned through itself and left a harder thing behind. "My lady?" Mrs. Dawlish said as they stopped before Madame Elise's establishment. "If the dowager asks whether I encourage this, I shall deny it. Then I shall say I led you astray. That won't comfort her, no. But it may amuse her." Madame Elise's shop smelled of silk, starch, lavender water, and anxiety. The woman herself came forward with the quick eyes of someone who had fitted gowns for women keeping secrets. "Lady Rosamund Vale," she said. "What an honor." Rosamund heard the pause before honor. She also heard the calculation beneath it. "Madame Elise, I require information, not a gown." The modiste's smile became cautious. "Information is often more expensive. I am told lace cuffs embroidered with silver flowers have passed through your hands." Madame Elise's face did not change enough for a careless person to notice. Rosamund was no longer careless. Many ladies enjoy silver work. One of them wore French perfume and had business near the Harrowmere stables. On the night a horse was drugged and a girth cut. Mrs. Dawlish inhaled sharply. Madame Elise looked toward the curtained workroom. "My lady, I sell gowns. I do not sell accusations. I am not asking you to accuse. I am asking whether Lady Clarissa Penworth ordered such cuffs. Lady Clarissa's accounts are private. Then perhaps her dismissed maids are not." The modiste's hand stilled. Rosamund stepped closer, lowering her voice. "A young stable boy is missing. A servant may be blamed for what a lady did. If you know where the dismissed maid can be found, silence will not protect the innocent. It will only protect the comfortable." Madame Elise looked at her then, truly looked as if the scandal sheet had described a creature she did not find in front of her. "Her name is Bess Carter," she said at last. "She left Lady Penworth's house 3 weeks ago, not by choice. She sometimes takes plain sewing near St. Martin's Lane. That is all I know. It is enough. It may be too much." "For whom?" Madame Elise's mouth tightened. "For women who must work when ladies grow tired of telling the truth." Rosamund bowed her head, not as a superior, but as one woman receiving risk from another. "Thank you." As they left the shop, a dark carriage stood across the street, too modest for display, and too well-sprung for poverty. Rosamund did not turn her head fully. She saw only the flash of a black sleeve through the window before the curtain fell. Mrs. Dawlish murmured, "We are followed." "By danger?" Rosamund asked. "By his grace, I suspect." Rosamund's fingers tightened around her reticule. That is not always the opposite. St. Martin's Lane lay only a few streets away, but it belonged to another London. The windows were narrower, the pavements dirtier, the air sharper with coal smoke and damp wool. Mrs. Dawlish objected twice, then gave up when Rosamund knocked at a lodging-house door and asked for Bess Carter. The girl who came down was not much older than Rosamund had been when her father died, though work and fear had made her look older. She had roughened hands, a thin face, and eyes that moved first to exits. "I don't know anything," Bess said before Rosamund spoke. "Then you are unfortunate," Rosamund replied gently, "because people who know nothing are often easiest to blame." Bess looked at Mrs. Dawlish, then back. "You're the lady from the horse story. I am the lady from the true part of it. The girl's mouth trembled, though she tried to hide it. I can't speak against Lady Clarissa. I need another place. No one hires a maid who carries tales. No one should have to choose between bread and truth. Ladies say that when they've never missed bread. The words struck cleanly because they were deserved. Rosamund opened her reticule and removed not money first, but the torn glove. She held it out. This was my father's. A piece of it was planted near a cut strap to make me look guilty. A boy named Tom Willis saw a silver lace cup near the stall, and now he is gone. If you know anything that can help him, tell me that much. Not for my reputation, for his safety. Bess stared at the glove. Something changed in her face at the sight of mended leather. Perhaps she had expected jewels, arrogance, a lady dabbling in scandal because she could afford danger. Instead, she saw repair. Lady Clarissa had cuffs like that, she whispered. Silver flowers on white lace. Madame Elise made them. Her ladyship tore one cuff the week before the hunt ball and flew into a rage because it showed. She said everything must be perfect at Harrowmere. Why? Because she meant to be Duchess. Did she say that? Bess glanced at the stairs. Not plain. Ladies like that never say plain. But she had letters from a man about money. She burned most of them. I saw one before she caught me looking. It said Penworth credit would not survive another quarter unless a ducal alliance was secured. Rosamund felt the shape of the plot grow clearer and uglier. Was Sir Edmund Vale named? Bess shook her head. No, but a gentleman came to the servants' entrance twice. Not a gentleman exactly. A gentleman's man. He wore Vale livery. Did he bring money? Once a packet, once a note. Lady Clarissa told me if I enjoyed my place, I would forget the colour of the livery. Mrs. Dawlish made a low sound of anger. Bess folded her arms tight over her apron. Then she dismissed me anyway. Said I had stolen ribbon. I didn't. I never stole from her. I believe you, Rosamund said. The girl's eyes filled at once, which hurt worse than suspicion. Belief should not be so rare that it undid a person. Footsteps sounded outside the lodging-house door. Bess flinched back. Rosamund moved before thinking, placing herself between the girl and the entrance. The door opened, and Sebastian stepped into the narrow hall, hat in hand, his expression controlled, but his eyes taking in everything. Bess's fear, Rosamund's position, Mrs. Dawlish's stiff disapproval, and the torn glove in Rosamund's hand. Lady Rosamund, he said quietly, I told you I would not be buried alive beneath concern. So you brought yourself to St. Martin's Lane, with a chaperone. Mrs. Dawlish lifted her chin. Very unwillingly, Your Grace. Sebastian's gaze returned to Rosamund, and for the first time since Almack's, there was no command in it. Only regret and something that looked dangerously like admiration. I owe you an apology. Yes, the answer came before she could soften it. Bess stared as if no woman had ever said such a thing to a duke and remained standing. Sebastian accepted the blow. You shall have it properly. Not here, not in a hallway, and not before it can become useful to gossip. Miss Carter, if you are willing, my mother can place you in safe employment until this matter is resolved. Bess's face went wary. I don't want charity that makes me a witness for sale. Rosamund turned to Sebastian. She is not to be purchased. No, he said at once. She is to be protected because she may be harmed for telling the truth. That was the correct answer. Rosamund hated how much she wanted it to be. Bess looked between them. Tom Willis was frightened of Sir Edmund's man, she whispered. If Tom ran, he might go where stable boys go when they need work and no questions, Tattersalls. Or the coaching yards. Sebastian nodded once. I will send men who know how to ask quietly. Not men who frighten him, Rosamund said. No, he replied. Not men who frighten him. A carriage clattered past outside, then stopped too abruptly. Mrs. Dawlish moved to the small front window. Her face tightened. Lady Rosamund. Rosamund joined her and looked through the cloudy glass. Sir Edmund stood on the pavement beside his carriage, speaking to his manservant. He was not looking for her yet. He was smiling. That frightened her more than anger would have done. Sebastian came to her side, close enough that she felt the warmth of him, but not so close that he touched her. He followed you as well, he said. Or he followed Bess. Rosamund looked back at the young maid, whose face had gone white. In that instant, her own ruin became less urgent than the terror in a servant's eyes. Mrs. Dawlish? Take Miss Carter upstairs and keep her away from the windows. My lady, Sir Edmund will see you. Yes. Rosamund slid the torn glove back into her reticule and straightened her shoulders. Let him see that I did not disappear. Sebastian's voice lowered. You do not have to face him alone, she met his eyes. Then stand beside me, your grace, not in front. Something in him yielded. Not weakness, choice. As you wish, he said. The words were simple. They altered the air. Rosamund opened the door before fear could make a second suggestion, and Sir Edmund turned at once. His smile freezing as he saw her step into the grey London afternoon with the Duke of Alder-mere at her side. Sir Edmund's smile did not survive the sight of the Duke beside Rosamund, but it died politely, which was more alarming than rage. My dear cousin, he said, standing on the pavement of St. Martin's Lane, as if the narrow street were a drawing-room arranged for his convenience. What an unexpected pleasure. I had been told you were indisposed after last night's unfortunate excitement. Rosamund descended the lodging-house step, with Mrs. Dawlish behind her and Sebastian at her side. She felt the eyes of two shop-boys, a passing maid, and Sir Edmund's manservant turned toward them. Even in a poorer street, reputation knew how to gather witnesses. I am not indisposed, she said. Plainly, Sir Edmund's gaze flicked to Sebastian. Your Grace, I trust you understand that my concern is familial. Lady Rosamund is unused to London pressures, and in her present state, she may confuse curiosity with courage. Sebastian did not move in front of her. He remembered. That steadied her more than it should have. Lady Rosamund appears to know the difference, he said. Sir Edmund's fingers tightened over the handle of his cane. Then perhaps she also knows that visiting dismissed servants in obscure lodgings can only worsen the impression already made. Rosamund looked at him carefully. How did you know whom I visited? His face changed by almost nothing. Almost. London is not large when gossip runs ahead of a lady. Neither is guilt, Sebastian said. Sir Edmund paled, then recovered with a laugh too thin to be harmless. A dramatic word, Your Grace. One hopes your military habits do not make every inconvenience an enemy. No, Sebastian replied. Only enemies. The pause that followed lasted only a breath. But it was enough for Sir Edmund to understand that the Duke's courtesy had limits. He bowed to Rosamund with public gentleness. Come home when you remember who has kept a roof over you. A roof is not kindness when it is held over someone like weather. His eyes sharpened. Careful, Rosamund. Lady. Rosamund, Sebastian said again, very softly. This time Sir Edmund did not correct him. He merely bowed, stepped into his carriage, and left with the smile of a man who had not finished speaking. By dusk, Rosamund was back at Harrowmere Hall, carrying the memory of Bess Carter's frightened eyes and Sir Edmund's warning like two weights balanced in either hand. The Dowager received the news without surprise. Men who speak of roofs often forget doors, she said. We shall see how he enjoys being shown one. Sebastian sent quiet inquiries to Tattersall's and the coaching yards for Tom Willis, then ordered Bess Carter brought under the Dowager's protection in a tenant cottage near the estate, where no Penworth servant could reach her. He did not apologize to Rosamund that evening, not because he refused, but because each time he approached, another matter of danger arrived between them. A groom questioned, a note delivered, a report from London. Late the next morning, the false message came on a scrap of paper folded into Rosamund's breakfast napkin. Tom Willis found, old tack room. Come alone if you want truth. Her first instinct was not to obey. That was how she knew the message had been written by someone who understood desperation but not her. She took it directly to the library, where Sebastian had been speaking with Mr. Dawlish. Only the steward was there. His Grace rode out to meet the man from Tattersall's, my lady, Dawlish said. He is expected within the hour. Rosamund showed him the note. Dawlish read it and frowned. This is bait. Yes, then you must not go. If we ignore it, whoever sent it may move the evidence. If we go openly, they may vanish. Dawlish's expression struggled between propriety and practicality. My lady, His Grace would have my head, then keep it by following at a distance. Send a stable hand to the South Drive for the Duke. Tell Mrs. Dawlish I am going to the old tack room and that she should arrive 3 minutes after me. Loudly. Dawlish looked scandalized, then impressed against his will. 3 minutes? 4 if you wish to appear innocent. The old tack room stood beyond the main mews, a low stone building no longer used except to store cracked saddles, worn harness, and memories of horses long dead. Rosamund crossed the yard beneath a pale sky, aware of Dawlish somewhere behind her, and more aware of the fact that fear did not always make a person retreat. Sometimes it made the world too clear. The latch lifted before she touched it. Sir Edmund stood inside. At last, he said, I feared the Duke had trained you out of obedience entirely. Rosamund remained near the door. Where is Tom Willis? Safe enough if he remains inconveniently silent. Her pulse struck hard. You know where he is. I know where many things are. Your allowance, your father's remaining settlement. The letters proving your gratitude to my household. The people willing to say your ambition grew tiresome long before Harrowmere. He gestured to a small table where papers lay weighted beneath a broken stirrup. Come inside. No, his smile chilled. Still performing courage? How exhausting it must be. Less exhausting than pretending concern. You think the Duke will save you because he stood beside you in a filthy street. My dear, great men tire quickly of inconvenient women. Last night he withdrew from you before Harp of Almack's. Remember that before you confuse attention with loyalty. The words found the wound because he knew where it lay. Rosamund kept her face still. What do you want, your signature? He lifted a paper, a simple statement. You admit that your knowledge of horses led you to approach valor before the ball, that you spoke foolishly of improving your circumstances, and that the Duke misunderstood the matter out of misplaced chivalry. You will not claim criminal intent. I am not a monster. Merely poor, and poor men must be practical. You want me to ruin myself so you may be paid. I want you to survive in the corner life has left you. Clarissa Penworth becomes Duchess. Her family's gratitude restores certain debts. I secure your future quietly in a cottage perhaps, with a companion if you behave. How generous. Do not mock generosity when you have lived on it for years. That old humiliation rose again, but it did not own her. Rosamund stepped toward the table, not to sign but to see. Beside the statement lay a packet of supposed evidence, a copied letter in a hand trying to resemble hers, a strip of white lace with silver flowers, and a small bright object that made her breath stop. A silver button, not a large one, not valuable, but familiar. It had been sewn near the wrist of her father's riding glove, one of a mismatched pair she had repaired after the button loosened. She had noticed it missing only after the ball, and had assumed the rain had torn it away. Now it lay there, polished, ready to prove a lie. You planted this. Her voice was quiet enough that Sir Edmund leaned closer. A convincing story requires intimate details. My father wore that glove. Your father left you sentiment instead of security. I am improving upon his legacy. Rosamund lifted her eyes. No, you are selling what he never would have touched. Sir Edmund's hand closed around the paper. He did not strike the table. Men like him did not need noise when the law and money had long spoken for them. Sign it? No, Rosamund? No. You will lose every roof, every invitation, every scrap of allowance. Then I will be poor in my own name. His face hardened. Do not be foolish. I am finished being convenient. The tack room door opened behind her. Sebastian stood there, breathing hard enough to suggest he had ridden fast, with Mr. Dawlish and Mrs. Dawlish visible beyond him in the yard. His eyes moved over the table, the paper, the lace, the silver button, then rested on Rosamund. He had heard enough. Sir Edmund went grey. Your Grace, this is a family matter. No, Sebastian said. It became mine when you brought her name into my house and tried to bury it there. Sir Edmund gathered the papers, but Rosamund was faster. She placed her bandaged hand over the packet and held it down. It hurt. She did not move. Sebastian stepped beside her, not before her. Take your hand away from the evidence, Sir Edmund. Evidence of what? a hysterical woman and a duke eager to excuse his own embarrassment. Rosamund looked at Sebastian, expecting fury. What she saw instead was control sharpened into purpose. "Dawlish," he said. "Witness that Sir Edmund Vale attempted to coerce Lady Rosamund into signing a false statement." "I witness it, Your Grace," Dawlish said from the doorway. Mrs. Dawlish added, "As do I." Sir Edmund's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time Rosamund had ever seen, he had no roof to hold over her. Sebastian reached for the scattered pages, but when Rosamund bent to gather the forged letter, her hand trembled. He saw it. Without a word, he knelt on the dusty floor and picked up each sheet one by one, laying them carefully into her hands as if they were not evidence, but pieces of dignity torn loose and returned. The gentleness nearly undid her. "Lady Rosamund," he said, low enough that only she heard. "I am sorry." She wanted to say it was too late. It was not. She wanted to say it was enough. It was not that either. "Then help me prove it where they shamed me." His eyes met hers. "Yes." A groom ran into the yard before he could say more. "Your Grace, a message from London." Sebastian took it, broke the seal, and read. The cold returned to his face. "Lady Clarissa has informed the patronesses and half the county that she possesses a sworn witness against Lady Rosamund," he said. Sir Edmund gave one small, ruined laugh. "You see, you are still too late." Rosamund looked at the silver button in her palm and closed her fingers around it. "No," she said. "Now we know what she fears." The old tack room had hardly been cleared of Sir Edmund's breath before the next lie arrived, wearing the shape of law. Sebastian read the message twice. Then once more, as if repetition could alter the insult written across it. Clarissa Penworth claimed to have a sworn statement from a groom who had seen Lady Rosamund Vale pay coin to have laudanum mixed into Valor's mash. The witness, she said, would speak before the next county assembly at Harrowmere if the Duke insisted upon defending a woman whose own family had already lost faith in her. Rosamund stood by the table with the silver button from her father's glove closed inside her palm. She did not feel shocked. Shock belonged to people who still believed cruelty had a natural end. What she felt was a cold, spreading clarity. "Who is the groom?" she asked. Sebastian folded the message with careful hands. "A man named Abel Trench. He worked at Harrowmere for 3 months last spring and was dismissed for drink and theft. Then why would anyone believe him? Because he will say what they want heard, and Clarissa will place him before people eager to be convinced. And because I am easier to suspect than she is." His silence admitted the truth. Mrs. Dawlish stood in the doorway with her lips pressed tight. Mr. Dawlish held the bundle of forged evidence as though it had a smell. Sir Edmund had been taken to the steward's office under the pretense of private discussion, though everyone knew the Duke had placed him there to keep him from running to Clarissa. Outside, the pale afternoon lay over the stable yard, ordinary and indecently calm. Rosamund looked at the false statement Sir Edmund had tried to force her to sign. Her name waited at the bottom like a grave someone had dug neatly. "What do you intend to do?" she asked. Sebastian looked at the papers, then at her bandaged hand. "End it quietly." The words struck harder because he spoke them gently. "Quietly, I will summon my solicitor." Sir Edmund's coercion, the planted button, the forged letter, the laudanum, and the perfume on the latch are enough to pressure Penworth into withdrawal. Clarissa's family is exposed to debt. They cannot afford a public contest if I make the cost plain. So they withdraw the witness, and society is told what? That the matter is resolved. Resolved for whom? His jaw tightened. "For you." "No. Lady Rosamund, no, Your Grace." The title came out sharp and his face registered it. Good. She wanted him to hear the distance he had rebuilt at Almack's when he stepped away for her sake. "You think silence will protect me, because silence has always protected families like yours. It does not protect women like me. It leaves us in corners with everyone politely pretending they do not remember the mud." Sebastian's eyes darkened. "I am not asking you to endure mud. You are asking me to let those who threw it decide when it is no longer visible." Dawlish lowered his eyes. Mrs. Dawlish did not. She looked at Rosamund as if she were hearing something she had waited years for another woman to say aloud. Sebastian took one step toward her, then stopped. He had learned at least that much. I withdrew the understanding at Almax, because I thought it would remove pressure from your name. It removed you. The answer left her before she could make it kinder. His face changed, not dramatically, but in the small way a man flinches when a wound is touched in public. Yes, he said, it did. The admission unsettled her. She had expected defense. I was wrong. Yes, I am trying not to repeat it. Then do not hide the truth to spare me from hearing whispers. I have heard whispers all my life. I want the room that believed the accusation to hear the answer. That room will be cruel. It already was. Clarissa will strike whatever hurts most. She already has. Sir Edmund may say things that cannot be unsaid. Rosamund opened her hand. The little silver button lay against her palm, bright with memory and dust. He has been saying them in private for years. Let him learn what his courage sounds like in daylight. Sebastian looked at the button, and for one moment his expression was not that of a duke, but of a man ashamed that he had arrived late to a suffering he could not undo. What would you have me do? He asked. There it was. Not command, not decision made on her behalf. A question. Rosamund drew a breath that felt like stepping onto ice. Stand beside me. Give me the evidence. Let me understand every piece before Clarissa presents hers. Let Bess Carter be protected, but not silenced. Find Tom Willis if he can be found. Bring Abel Trench to Harrowmere if he is willing to lie there. And when I speak, do not rescue me from the sound of my own voice. Sebastian held her gaze. And if I cannot bear to watch them wound you, then bear it anyway. The words were quiet. They seemed to pass through him more deeply than anger. Mr. Dawlish cleared his throat. Your Grace, if I may. The county assembly is already planned for Friday. Invitations were sent before the hunt ball. It would not appear unusual to hold it. It will appear very unusual, the dowager said from the yard, making everyone turn. She stood just outside the door, wrapped in a dark cloak, her cane planted firmly on the stones. That is precisely why half the county will come. People adore being shocked in a respectable room. Sebastian looked toward his mother. You were listening. I am old, not dead. She came inside and took in the table with one glance. Lady Rosamund is right. Private settlement would save the carpets and ruin the woman. Public accusation requires public repair. It may expose her to worse. It will certainly expose Clarissa to better. The dowager turned to Rosamund. You understand that once this begins, pity will not be available to you. I do not want pity. Good. It is usually badly made. Sebastian exhaled slowly. Something in him yielded, not because he had been defeated, but because he had chosen trust over control and found the choice painful. Very well. The assembly will go forward. Dawlish, send for Larkin, my solicitor. Have the account books from the Penworth subscriptions and the Harrowmere stable ledgers brought to my study. Mrs. Dawlish, Bess Carter is to be moved before dusk to the West Lodge under my mother's authority. No one speaks to her without your knowledge. Yes, Your Grace. Send Pike to the coaching yards again. I want Tom Willis found, but not dragged in like a criminal. Offer safety first. Yes, Your Grace. Dawlish said. Rosamund felt the machinery of his power begin to move around her. For once, it did not feel like a cage. It felt like tools laid within reach. Sebastian turned back to her. You will receive everything we know tonight. Everything, everything. Even what may make your household look careless. Especially that. She nodded, though trust still came hard. Then I will read it. The dowager studied them both with a look too sharp to be sentimental. And before Friday, my son will apologize properly. Sebastian did not look away. Yes, Rosamund's heartbeat shifted. That is not necessary for the case. No, he said. It is necessary for me. That evening, Harrowmere's library became a war room disguised as a gentleman's refuge. Ledgers lay open beside letters, stable lists, calling cards, scraps of lace, the anonymous note, the false letter from Almax, and Sir Edmund's failed confession statement. Rosamund sat across from Sebastian at the long table, with Mrs. Dawlish near the door, and the dowager asleep in a chair, in the manner of a commander who missed nothing. Candlelight turned the windows black. Rain began after supper, tapping softly against the glass. Sebastian placed Abel Trench's statement before Rosamund. This arrived by messenger an hour ago. Rosamund read it. The lie was neat, too neat. Trench claimed she had met him behind the south stable, promised him money, and said, "A clever woman must make her own fortune before doors close." Her fingers stopped on the line. Sir Edmund. Sebastian leaned forward. The phrase, "It is built from his words," he said. "Generosity has limits," he said. "London has fewer doors than women imagine." Clarissa's letter used the first phrase. This statement uses the second. Then Clarissa and Sir Edmund shared more than money. They shared language. He looked at her with a quick, fierce approval that made her look down before it could warm too much. That may matter. It will matter if Abel Trench did not hear Sir Edmund say it himself. "I will find that out." She set the paper down. "No, we will." Sebastian accepted the correction. "We will." The rain thickened. For a moment, the room held only the sound of weather and pages. Then Sebastian reached into his waistcoat pocket and withdrew the silver horsehead pin. He placed it on the table between them, not pushing it toward her. "I should not have let the room at Almack's believe distance meant doubt." Rosamund looked at the pin, but did not touch it. "You called the letter forged. And then I stepped back," his voice lowered. "I told myself I was removing a burden from your name. The truth is uglier. I was afraid my claim, even an honorable one, would make you a target. So I made a choice without asking whether you preferred the wound or the shield." She looked up. "Do you know what I preferred? Belief." The word was simple. It struck both of them. Rosamund's throat tightened, but she would not make his apology easier by weeping into it. "Yes." Sebastian's hand curled once on the table, then released. "I believe you. Not because the evidence now favors you. I should have believed the shape of you before the papers taught me how. You ran toward danger when every person in that ballroom stood still. You defended my horse before yourself. You protected Bess Carter when she had nothing to offer you but risk. I do not say this to persuade you to forgive me. I say it because truth said late is still owed." Rosamund sat very still. Something inside her, long trained not to lean toward warmth, moved despite itself. "I'm not ready to forgive the public wound. I don't ask it, but I can accept the truth. Then I will begin there." The words were restrained. Their restraint made them intimate. Rosamund reached for the pin at last, then stopped before touching it. Not yet. Pain flickered through his face. But he nodded. "When you choose." Outside the library, footsteps hurried down the corridor. Mr. Dawlish entered with rain on his shoulders and a mud-spattered note in his hand. "Your Grace. Tom Willis has been seen near the northern coaching yard." He ran when approached, but he left this with a hostler who knew Pike. Sebastian took the note and brought it to Rosamund without opening it first. That mattered. She broke the fold. The handwriting was childish and uneven. "I saw the lady with silver flowers give the gentleman's man a packet. I did not take her money. I did not touch the horse. Please do not let them send me to jail." Rosamund closed her eyes. When she opened them, Sebastian was watching her, not as if she needed rescue, but as if her next choice would lead them. "Friday," she said. "Friday," he answered. And for the first time since Almack's, the silence between them did not feel like mistrust. It felt like a promise being built carefully enough not to break. Friday arrived with a sky the color of pewter and a house full of people pretending they had come for music. By 7 o'clock, Harrowmere Hall glowed again with candles, polished glass, and the cold glitter of county society, but no one mistook the assembly for entertainment. The musicians waited near the end of the ballroom, with their bows lowered. The refreshment table remained untouched. Guests stood in careful groups, wearing expressions of sorrow, curiosity, and moral duty, which, in Rosamund's experience, were often the same face adjusted for lighting. She entered with the Dowager Duchess on one side and Mrs. Dawlish on the other. Sebastian did not offer his arm at the threshold. He stood ahead of her, near the terrace doors, giving her the dignity of entering by herself. Yet the moment the first whisper rose, He turned. His gaze found hers across the room and did not move away. That was the difference. At Almack's, he had stepped back where everyone could see. Tonight, before everyone who had come hungry for her disgrace, he let the room see that he did not doubt where he stood. Lady Clarissa Penworth looked magnificent in pale blue silk, her mother beside her, and Sir Edmund Vale not far away, his face arranged in grave reluctance. Clarissa's lace cuffs were new tonight, plain and white without silver flowers. That absence confirmed more than ornament could have done. Rosamund's hand closed around the small silver button hidden in her glove. The torn glove had been repaired enough to wear, though the missing leather still showed. She wanted it visible. She wanted them to look at what they had tried to make shameful. The dowager's cane tapped once. "Well," she murmured. "Let us allow truth to be unfashionably punctual." Sebastian stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, I regret that an evening arranged for music must begin with an uglier necessity. Accusations have been made against Lady Rosamund Vale concerning the events of the Hunt Ball. Lady Clarissa Penworth has requested that a witness be heard before those who have repeated those accusations. I have permitted it on one condition. All answers will be heard with the same attention as all charges." Clarissa inclined her head. "How fair, Your Grace." Her voice carried just enough tremor to sound noble. No lady wishes to speak in such a painful matter. But when an ancient house is placed in danger by manipulation, silence becomes cowardice. Rosamund felt Mrs. Dawlish stiffen. Sebastian did not look at Clarissa. "Then proceed." Abel Trench was brought in through the side doors, badly shaved, overbrushed, and frightened beneath a coat too fine for him. He did not look at the grooms stationed near the terrace. He looked at Clarissa once, and only once. "Tell His Grace what you told Lady Clarissa," Sir Edmund said, his tone kind enough to poison. Abel swallowed. "Lady Rosamund gave me coin to put laudanum in the horse's mash. Said she needed the beast unsettled. Said a clever woman must make her own fortune before doors close." The room stirred. Someone whispered, "Shocking." Rosamund looked at the man who had been hired to bury her and found him less terrifying than she had imagined. Lies sounded smaller when spoken by a person afraid of them. "Mr. Trench," she said. "When did I give you this coin?" Abel blinked. "Night before the ball. Where South Stable? At what hour? After 10. The South Stable was locked at 9 by Mr. Pike after Valor's exercise. Mr. Dawlish has the stable ledger. Your name does not appear on the property that week." Abel's mouth opened. Clarissa spoke quickly. "A desperate lady would hardly sign a ledger, Lady Rosamund." Rosamund turned to her. "No, but a dismissed groom returning to Harrowmere would be seen by someone, was he?" Silence followed. Sebastian lifted his hand. Pike, the head groom, came forward. "No, my lady. I saw no such man, and I would have known him. Trench was dismissed for stealing oats and selling harness buckles." Abel flushed. Sir Edmund sighed. "Servants protect their employers." "And desperate men protect their buyers," Rosamund replied. A few faces changed. Not enough, but some. Clarissa's eyes cooled. Lady Rosamund is skilled in making herself sound reasonable. It is how this entire misfortune began. Rosamund held the silver button in her palm, but did not show it yet. "The phrase Mr. Trench used was not mine. It was made from words Sir Edmund spoke after the Hunt Ball, and words he used again when he tried to force me to sign a false confession." Gasps moved this time. Sir Edmund stepped forward. "This is outrageous." Sebastian's voice cut across the room. "You will answer when asked." Sir Edmund went still. Rosamund looked at him. "Did you or did you not tell me that London has fewer doors than women imagine once their names grow inconvenient?" His mouth tightened. "I may have offered prudent advice." "And did you or did you not tell me that generosity has limits? I have supported you for years. You have controlled what remained of my father's settlement and called it charity." The words rang cleanly, and Rosamund felt them leave her like a chain unlocked. Sebastian did not intervene. He stood beside her line of sight, silent and present. Clarissa laughed softly. How moving! Yet resentment toward one's family does not explain a drugged horse. "No," Rosamund said. "It explains who had language to lend a false witness." Sebastian turned toward the terrace. Bring Valor. A deeper silence seized the room. The terrace doors opened to the stable court, where lanterns burned in the grey evening, and grooms waited with valor beneath a dark rug. The horse stepped into view. Not into the ballroom itself, but to the threshold where his shadow reached across the polished floor. The memory of his last entrance passed through every guest like wind through candles. Clarissa's face tightened. Sebastian spoke without looking away from her. Lady Clarissa, you have said repeatedly that you feared for my horse and my house. You also implied that Lady Rosamund alone possessed unusual access to valor. Come forward. Clarissa smiled as if humoring a difficult man. Your Grace, surely you don't mean to make a spectacle of an animal. No, I mean to learn whether he remembers a scent. Her smile faltered. Horses don't give testimony. No, Rosamund said. But they do remember fear. Clarissa had no graceful way to refuse. She moved toward the terrace with her head high and one gloved hand extended. Valor's ears went flat. He did not rear. He did not make a dramatic display for the waiting room. He stepped backward, once, twice. Then he turned his head away from her hand and pulled toward Rosamund with a low, uneasy sound. The ballroom breathed as one body. Rosamund did not move until Sebastian nodded. Then she stepped forward, slow and open-palmed. Valor came to her at once and lowered his head until his muzzle brushed her repaired glove. No applause came. That would have made it cheap. The silence was better. It had weight. Clarissa's color rose. This proves nothing. A horse can be trained. Sebastian's eyes sharpened. Indeed, that was the accusation, was it not? Mr. Dawlish emerged from the stable court, carrying a wrapped saddle strap. Your Grace. Sebastian took it and placed it on the table near the terrace doors. Pike unfolded the cloth. The strap was the one removed after the hunt ball. Its underside now loosened, where a thin fold of fabric had been tucked beneath a damaged edge. White lace showed against the dark leather. Tiny silver flowers caught the candlelight. A sound went through the ladies like silk tearing. Rosamund saw Clarissa's hand curl at her side. Lady Penworth whispered, Clarissa. Clarissa recovered quickly, too quickly. 100 ladies own lace. Not this lace, the dowager said. She had not raised her voice, but age and rank gave every word a blade. Madame Elise has confirmed the pattern was commissioned for Penworth House, and one cuff was reported torn before the hunt ball. Clarissa looked toward Sir Edmund. He did not look back. Cowardice, Rosamund thought, had excellent posture when trained from childhood. Sebastian lifted the lace with a clean cloth. We have perfume on the stable latch, matching the French scent you wore during your morning call. We have laudanum in Valor's mash. We have the false letter at Almack's using Sir Edmund's private words. We have Abel Trench repeating a phrase constructed from those same words. We have Bess Carter's account of Vale livery, carrying packets to Penworth House. We have Tom Willis's note saying he saw the lady with silver flowers pass a packet to Sir Edmund's man. Clarissa's face had gone hard now, beauty stripped of softness. A maid and a runaway boy. How convenient that Lady Rosamund's defenders are all beneath her. Rosamund lifted her head. No. How revealing that yours are all paid, frightened, or indebted. The words struck. Even Sebastian looked at her with sudden, fierce pride. Clarissa's mouth opened, but Sebastian stepped forward at last, not to cover Rosamund, but to stand where the room could see them in the same line. Any further insult to Lady Rosamund is an insult to House Harrow. Clarissa froze. Sir Edmund went pale. The whole room understood what that meant. Not romance. Not yet. Power. Protection. A door closing against cruelty. Sebastian's voice lowered. She is the bravest person beneath this roof, and I will not hear cowards call courage ambition. Rosamund did not look at him, because if she did, all the careful strength in her chest might change shape. She looked at Clarissa instead, and saw for the first time fear. Then Sebastian turned to Mr. Dawlish. Bring the account books, bring the Penworth letters, and send for Mr. Larkin. We will finish this before the county leaves my house with another lie. The musicians stood forgotten. The candles burned steadily. Outside, Valor stamped once on the stone, and the sound travelled through the open doors like judgment arriving at last. Mr. Dawlish returned with the account books, as if carrying not leather-bound ledgers, but a blade polished by patience. Behind him came Mr. Larkin, Sebastian's solicitor, a narrow man with spectacles, a black coat, and the solemn expression of one accustomed to watching aristocratic sins become ink. The county assembly did not move. No one wished to seem vulgar enough to enjoy the spectacle. And no one possessed the strength to leave before the ruin of someone else has been properly assigned. Rosamund stood near the terrace doors, with Valor beyond her shoulder, and Sebastian at her side. Not in front of her. That mattered more than she could safely think about. Clarissa remained motionless beside her mother, beautiful in the terrible way. Porcelain was beautiful before it cracked. Sir Edmund had retreated half a step, but the space behind him was filled with guests. There was nowhere elegant left to go. Sebastian placed one hand on the account book. Mr. Larkin will speak only to what has been verified. Mr. Larkin bowed. Your Grace, the Penworth family debts have increased sharply during the past year. Several notes came due within the month, and 2 creditors recorded that repayment was expected upon the announcement of a ducal engagement. Lady Penworth made a soft, wounded sound. Clarissa lifted her chin. Debt is not sabotage. No. Rosamund said, but fear of debt explains desperation. Clarissa turned on her. You would know a great deal about desperation, wouldn't you? The room inhaled. Sebastian's hand tightened once on the ledger, but he did not speak over Rosamund. She felt the restraint as a gift. Yes, she said. That is why I know the difference between need and cruelty. The answer landed quietly. It was not dramatic enough for gossip, but it was true enough for shame. Mr. Larkin opened the next paper. A payment was made from a Vale account managed by Sir Edmund Vale to a servant formerly connected with Penworth House. The sum matches a packet described by Miss Bess Carter and by the note of Tom Willis. Sir Edmund laughed once. A servant's tale and a frightened boy's scribble. Are we now governed by kitchen rumour? The dowager's cane struck the floor. We are governed by evidence, Sir Edmund, which is why you appear increasingly uncomfortable. Sebastian nodded to Dawlish. The steward laid the forged letter from Almack's, Abel Trench's statement, Sir Edmund's failed confession paper, and the anonymous note side by side upon the long table brought from the card room. The phrases match, Sebastian said. Generosity has limits. Doors close. A clever woman makes her own fortune. Lady Rosamund heard them from Sir Edmund. Clarissa used them in accusation. Abel Trench repeated them in a sworn lie. Abel, who stood near the side doors between 2 grooms, began to tremble. I didn't know it would go so far, Clarissa snapped. Be silent. The command betrayed her more quickly than a confession. Abel looked at Sebastian, then at Rosamund, and fear made him honest at last. She said no one would believe a poor lady over a Penworth. Sir Edmund's man gave me the line to say, I never saw Lady Rosamund with the mash. I never saw her at all. A sound moved through the ballroom, not surprise exactly, but the collapse of a lie many people had chosen because it entertained them. Clarissa went white. He is lying now because you frightened him. No, Rosamund said. He lied before because you paid him. Lady Penworth reached for her daughter's arm. Clarissa pulled away. And what of the horse? What of the old custom? Are we all to pretend this woman did not benefit from a scene no one can explain? Sebastian's face hardened, but Rosamund raised her hand slightly. I benefited. She looked around the room. I was mocked before the ball, accused after it, shamed at Almack's, threatened by my own cousin, and named in a gossip sheet as if courage were indecency. If that is benefit, Lady Clarissa, I would hate to see what you call harm. Several women lowered their eyes. Not all. Enough. Clarissa's voice lost its silk. You were nothing, a dependent, a woman with old gloves and no future. Then one animal knelt, and suddenly every door opened. Rosamund stepped closer, still calm. No, one animal was frightened because you helped make him so. A boy was endangered because you required a spectacle. A household was stained because Sir Edmund required money. And my name was useful because society already thought little of me. She turned to the room then, not to Clarissa. That is why the lie worked. Silence followed. It was not the silence of shock now. It was the silence of people forced to recognize their own fingerprints on another person's disgrace. Sebastian spoke into it with measured force. House Harrow withdraws all patronage from Penworth House, Mr. Larkin will deliver the evidence concerning bribery, false statements, and tampering with stable property to the proper magistrate. Sir Edmund Vale is removed from any management over Lady Rosamund's settlement as of this night, pending formal petition and review. Until that is completed, I will guarantee her independent maintenance, not as charity but as restitution for wrong done beneath my roof. Sir Edmund stared at him. You cannot simply take family authority. I can expose how you used it. The words were quiet, final, and devastating. Sir Edmund looked smaller than Rosamund had ever seen him. Clarissa's last mask shattered into anger. How noble you all sound. But she is still the woman a horse pitied. The insult hung there, ugly and absurd, and for a breath no one knew what to do with it. Then the dowager laughed. It was not merry, it was merciless. My dear girl, if valor had ever pitied fools, he would have knelt before half this room. A startled ripple broke through the guests, quickly swallowed. Sebastian turned to Rosamund. Before everyone, before the women who had whispered and the men who had watched, he bowed his head. Not the shallow courtesy owed to a lady. A real bow, lower than pride liked and higher than grovelling, would have made useful. Lady Rosamund, he said, I owe you an apology before the witnesses who saw me fail you. At Almack's, I believed withdrawal would spare you. I was wrong. I allowed the room to mistake my caution for doubt. I should have stood beside you then, as I do now. Rosamund felt every eye on her, but for once their attention did not steal from her. It gave something back. I accept the truth of that apology, she said softly, his eyes lifted. May I ask one more thing before this assembly? Her breath caught. You may ask, not because valor knelt, not because custom demands it, not because scandal requires repair. Your name is cleared before I speak. Your choice is free before I ask. His voice lowered, yet the room heard every word. Will you permit me, in time and with proper honor, to court you as the woman I should have been brave enough to trust from the beginning? It was not a proposal forced by embarrassment. It was better. It was a door opened without a hand pushing her through. Rosamund looked past him to Valor, waiting at the threshold, calm now beneath the lanterns. She thought of her father's gloves, of the boy saved, of Bess Carter believed, of every room where she had stood small because it was safer. Then she looked back at Sebastian. Yes, she said, but not as a rescued woman. Something like light moved through his face. No, as a partner. Always. Clarissa made a sharp sound and turned away, but no one followed her. Lady Penworth did, because mothers sometimes loved even what they had helped spoil. Sir Edmund remained where he was, trapped inside the ruin of his own arithmetic. The assembly did not applaud. It would have been indecent. Instead, people bowed their heads as Rosamund passed, and the movement travelled through the room like a correction long overdue. At the terrace doors, Pike brought Valor closer. Rosamund touched the horse's neck, and he lowered his head into her palm. Sebastian stood a respectful pace away. You do not have to ride tonight, he said. She looked at the ballroom behind her, at the floor, where she had once entered by accident and been named by rumor. Then she looked at the open night beyond the terrace. I know, Pike brought the mounting block. Rosamund gathered her skirts with the efficiency of a woman done being arranged by others, placed her boot upon the block, and settled onto Valor's back. No panic seized the horse this time. No broken strap shifted beneath her. No scream cut the air. Sebastian came to Valor's side and rested one hand lightly on the bridle. Where will you go? He asked. Rosamund looked down at him, feeling the cold air on her face and the repaired glove against the reins. Only around the courtyard. That sounds sensible. It is not meant to be sensible. His mouth curved at last. No, it is meant to be mine. He stepped back. Valor moved forward at her gentle command, carrying her across the threshold, not as bait, not as proof, not as a lady trapped by custom, but as herself. Behind her, society watched without laughter. Ahead, The night opened clean and dark. For the first time since she had entered Harrowmere Hall, Rosamund did not feel pursued by scandal. She felt followed by truth. 3 months after the county assembly, the bells of the village church rang across Harrowmere with such clear winter joy that even those who had once whispered found themselves listening in silence. The proper banns had been read. The proper witnesses had gathered. The proper vows had been spoken before God, family, tenants, servants, and a county that had finally learned the difference between spectacle and honor. Lady Rosamund Vale entered the church that morning on the Dowager Duchess's arm and left it as Rosamund Harrow, Duchess of Alder-mere. But the title was not the first thing people noticed. They noticed that she walked without lowering her eyes. They noticed that the Duke did not lead her as if claiming a prize. He walked beside her, as if accompanying a sovereign across land they would govern together. Outside the church, the villagers cheered because the Dowager had ordered no one to be restrained by excessive dignity. Pike stood near the lane with Tom Willis, who had been found at the northern coaching yard, thin and terrified but unharmed. Tom now wore a clean stable jacket and held his cap so tightly that his knuckles showed white. When Rosamund paused before him, he tried to bow and nearly dropped the cap. "Your Grace," he stammered. The words seemed to frighten him more than any accusation had. Rosamund smiled. "Tom, I hope you will still tell me if Valor is stealing apples." The boy's face broke open with relief. "Yes, Your Grace, he does sometimes. Only when Mr. Pike isn't looking. Then Mr. Pike must improve his eyesight." Pike coughed into his fist. Sebastian, standing close enough to hear, looked at Rosamund with that restrained warmth that still had the power to make the air change around her. "Valor has excellent taste in theft," he said. "He's a dreadful influence," Rosamund answered. "Then we shall blame him for everything that cannot be proved. That would be unwise. He has already proved more than half the county." The Dowager gave a pleased little hum behind them. "My dear, that horse has better judgment than several peers I have known." No one mentioned Clarissa Penworth aloud on the church steps, and that was perhaps the most final punishment society could offer. Her family had left London before the season resumed. Penworth House was shuttered, its debts under negotiation, and its invitations no longer returned. Clarissa had not been dragged through the courts for the amusement of those who once adored her. But Mr. Larkin had ensured that the evidence of bribery, false witness, and stable tampering reached the proper hands. Her beauty could no longer purchase trust. Lady Penworth had written one letter to the Dowager, begging for discretion, and another to Rosamund, offering an apology so polished it reflected no soul. Rosamund had answered the first with silence, and the second with one sentence. "I hope your daughter learns that rank cannot make cruelty safe." Sir Edmund Vale had fared no better. His authority over Rosamund's remaining settlement had been stripped away through Mr. Larkin's work, and his creditors had grown much less patient once the Duke of Alder-mere stopped pretending the man's respectability was useful. He retreated to a smaller house and spoke often of family ingratitude to anyone trapped long enough to listen. Rosamund did not rejoice in his fall. She merely slept better, knowing he no longer held any woman's bread in one hand and obedience in the other. Bess Carter had been placed with the Dowager's own housekeeper for training. Though the Dowager claimed the girl's standards were already too high for half of England, Mrs. Dawlish now supervised a new household rule written in Sebastian's own hand. No servant, tenant, dependent, or female relation attached to Harrowmere would be dismissed, accused, or coerced without hearing, witness, and review. It was not revolution. It was not parliament. It was one house choosing not to make silence easy for the powerful. Rosamund had read the rule twice, then looked at Sebastian until he shifted in the rare discomfort of a man being seen too clearly. "You did not ask me to write it," he had said. "No. You approve?" "I approve of a man who learns without being begged." He had looked down at the paper, then back at her. "I'm trying, I know." That had been before the wedding. Now after the breakfast, after the toasts, after the tenants had been fed, and the villagers had gone home with ribbons and warm bread, Rosamund entered the Harrowmere ballroom again. Not by accident, not through panic. Not beneath the old name that had followed her like a debt. The chandeliers were lit, but the room was quieter than it had been on the night everything began. No one laughed behind fans. No one measured her sleeves or her age or the cost of her gown. The women who had once leaned towards scandal now curtsied low and called her Your Grace. Some did so from shame, some from calculation. Rosamund accepted curtsies with the same calm courtesy. Dignity, she had learned, was not the refusal to remember injury. It was the refusal to let injury become one's only language. Near the refreshment table, Lady Westlake stumbled through an apology hidden inside a compliment. Your Grace, I fear many of us misunderstood the events of that unfortunate night. Rosamund held her gaze. Many did. Lady Westlake coloured. Yes, quite. Rosamund allowed the silence to last just long enough to teach, but not long enough to humiliate. Understanding is improved by listening earlier. Indeed. Your Grace. As the woman withdrew, Sebastian approached with 2 glasses of lemonade and a look of faint admiration. You could have destroyed her. She would not have understood the lesson if I had. And what was the lesson? That mercy is not forgetfulness. He handed her a glass. I shall remember that. You had better. You are married to me now. His eyes softened in a way that would once have been hidden behind command. I rely on it. Later, when the house had quieted and the last guest had gone, Sebastian found Rosamund in the stable yard. The moon hung above Harrowmere Hall, silvering the roof lines and the dark stretch of fields beyond. Valor stood in his stall with the top door open. His great head lowered toward Rosamund's hands, as if receiving tribute. She wore her wedding gown still, though the hem had already brushed straw, and she did not seem troubled by it. Sebastian stopped a few feet away, allowing the scene to settle before entering it. My mother is looking for you, he said. Your mother always knows where I am. True. She is looking for the pleasure of pretending she does not. Rosamund smiled without turning. Then let her search a little longer. He came to stand beside her. For a while, neither spoke. Valor breathed warm air into the cold night. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called from the elm trees. Sebastian reached into his coat and withdrew a small parcel wrapped in soft cloth. I have something for you, Rosamund looked at him. If it is another title, I refuse. One is burden enough. Wise man. He placed the parcel in her hands. She unfolded it carefully. Inside lay her father's riding glove, repaired in dark thread so fine that the mended seam seemed less like concealment than honor. The missing silver button had been restored at the wrist. The old leather remained worn. No one had tried to make it look new. That was what undid her. Rosamund touched the button with one finger. You kept it as it was. It had already endured more honestly than most people in our circle. Her throat tightened. Sebastian. I asked Pike for the best leather worker in Hampshire. He said the best repair is one that does not pretend the tear never happened. She looked up at him, and this time she did not hide the tears standing bright in her eyes. Your stablemen are becoming philosophers. Only when under your influence. She laughed softly, then pressed the glove against her heart. My father would have liked you. Sebastian's face changed. The words struck somewhere deep. I hope so. Not at first, perhaps. He would have made you earn it. Then he and his daughter share a method. Rosamund held out the glove. Will you help me put it on? He took it with care and slid the old leather over her hand, fastening the restored button at her wrist. His touch was restrained, almost reverent. When he finished, he did not release her immediately. Valor chose correctly before I did, he said. Valor was frightened and wise. You were frightened and stubborn. That is not a flattering distinction. It is an accurate one. His thumb rested lightly over the repaired seam. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve the moment you chose to stay. Rosamund looked toward the stable doors, beyond them to the drive, the gates. The fields, the country that had once seemed to hold more closed doors than open roads. I did not stay because I had nowhere else to go. I know. I stayed because you learned to stand beside me. I will keep learning. She believed him, not because love had made him perfect, but because it had made him willing. That was rarer and stronger. Pike had left Valor saddled lightly for the morning, but Rosamund glanced at the horse, then at the moonlit yard. Sebastian followed her look and gave a quiet laugh. Now? It is only a mile around the inner field. It is nearly midnight. Then no one will see whether I sit properly. I will see. You may admire silently. I doubt I can promise silence. Then admire carefully. He offered his hand, and she used it not because she needed lifting, but because accepting steadiness was not the same as surrendering strength. A few minutes later, they rode through the open gates of the Harrowmere together, Valor carrying Rosamund at an easy walk, while Sebastian rode beside her on a bay gelding. The house glowed behind them. No longer a place where scandal had trapped her, but a home where truth had been made welcome. The repaired glove held the reins. The silver button caught the moonlight. Rosamund looked ahead to the dark ribbon of the lane and felt no whisper chasing her, no old shame calling her back, no laughter waiting at the threshold. Beside her, Sebastian kept pace, not ahead, not behind. Beside her, and together they rode out into the quiet English night, not as a woman rescued and a duke redeemed, but as two people who had chosen, before witnesses and in private, to build a life where courage would never again have to beg for belief.